Welcome everyone to this work session, joint work session between the school committee and the South Kingstown Town Council. It is January 13th, 2016. It's a Wednesday, and it's 6:35. Tonight we're going to be discussing the capital budget again. And first order of business is to rise and pledge allegiance to the flag. And so we'll get right down to business because these tend to take a while. Raisa, do you want to take it up?
Scott and Maureen will not be here this evening, but we are expecting Michelle and Myrna. They're just running a little bit late. So I'm going to turn it over to Kristen. Or
Steve, do you start, or is it just us? You start?
okay, Mary Ann.
Okay, great. Thank Good evening. This evening I'm here to present the capital budget for the South Kingston schools. I'll be presenting the pay-as-you-go piece as well as the 6-year capital as submitted to the town manager. The school's capital plan includes major non-recurring tangible fixed assets with a useful life of 5 years or more. The value in excess of $10,000. As I stated, As I stated, the two areas of focus will be the 6-year capital improvement and also the pay-as-you-go. The bonded program history. Prior to 2009, since the facility studies audit, the school district, working with the town, budgeted about $1 million annually for repairs to facilities. From 2010 to 2014, due to a number of economic reasons, shortfalls in revenues, and revenues we did not receive from the state, we had some off years during that time frame. In 2014, we did, a bond issue was passed in 2015, which began our 6 years project. This past fiscal year, in fiscal year 15, was the first year we began some of the work at our schools. We did this high school stairwells and Peasedale's roof. This past summer, we focused on the corridor renovations and the third floor renovations at the high school. Going forward, we'll be focusing on the elementary schools and the middle schools. A capital improvement plan is typically a long-range plan that is 5 to 6 years, which identifies the capital needs of the district and provide a funding schedule and timeline for those particular projects and the implementation of those projects. It's basically a roadmap. The capital plan is reviewed each year by staff. We do have a team at the school district that meets to review the capital plan. The capital plan should not be included in routine maintenance that we do on an annual basis. There is a significant difference between capital improvement and general building maintenance or routine upkeep of buildings and grounds. The capital budget describes large, non-recurring expenditures of funds to purchase, construct, or renovate fixed assets such as land, buildings, or other physical plants. Examples of capital improvement projects might be bleacher replacement, heating systems, computer upgrades. We are fortunate here in Rhode Island to have what's called the school housing aid. It is funds appropriated by the General Assembly in support to complete the our capital projects. We are fortunate here to receive 35%. Up until recently, there was a moratorium on that, which the only approved projects were those that were related to health and safety, which we did receive approval for those, which we are now in the process of implementing. The good news is the moratorium has been lifted, and the 35% will apply to all renovations and improvements as long as they go through the process of being approved by the Rhode Island Department of Education. Back in June of 2013, the school district engaged RGB to do a facility analysis and study of all our facilities. They inspected the sites, the architectural, the plumbing, the HVAC system, floors, and also site plans. Upon completion of that study, the school district presented an application to the Rhode Island Department of Education. Any construction work that is completed within the school district to receive the 35% reimbursement, you must submit what's called a necessity of application to the Rhode Island Department of Education. The first step is the letter of intent, followed by RIDE's preliminary approval. The commissioner then makes a recommendation to the Board of Regents for approval, and then the Board of Regents ultimately approves that. Once we get that approval, the process is not done with RIDE. There is still Stage 3 and 4. Stage 3 requires us to submit plans and schematics to RIDE as we take on each individual project. I am scheduled to visit with RIDE in 2 weeks to discuss the roofing projects that we anticipate doing this coming summer. Once these projects are completed, we must also submit the necessary forms and documentations in order to get the reimbursement from RIDE. It's basically a 5-step, 4-stage process to get that reimbursement. As I stated, districts and anyone seeking approval for the necessity of school construction must get that approval to RIDE. RIDE did update these regulations back in 2007, and they've been around since 2007 with the new regulation. The process of approval does take time, and it is necessary to engage such companies as RGB to assist us with that process. To provide you with a timeline, since we engaged RGB back in 2013, June 2013 was when we engaged RGB. They completed the study August, 2 months later, 2013. The school committee approved the capital plan in September of 2013, and then as revised by the town manager in November 2013. RIDE Stage 1 approval was in December 2013. Town approval of the capital plan was in January 2014. We received RIDE Stage 2 approval in March of 2014. We proceeded to receive enabling legislation from the General Assembly in March of 2014. Board approval, Rhode Island Education Board approval in May of 2014, and we commenced the work in July of 2014. The bond was approved by the voters in November of 2014. The purpose of the school improvement bond that was approved by the voters back in November of 2014 was to focus on health and safety repairs and renovations throughout the school district. These particular health and safety renovations and repairs were identified in the study that was completed by RGB in 2013. That study outlined a number of repairs and renovations, and based on at that time, the Chief Financial Officer, the Director of Facilities, and working with the town manager, identified those projects that we would move forward with. At this point, we will be borrowing $4 million that was approved. The town in fiscal 2016-17 will borrow $1 million. In 2018 and fiscal 18-19, an additional $2 million, and in 2020 and 21, a final another $1 million.
Just a point of clarification, there's $5 million currently authorized and unissued for schools. Within the capital improvement program, we're suggesting use of $4 million of that $5 million. we'll use the 2003 authorization that remains first, and then move into those other dollars. Last year, we had started out with a $5 million tag. We've revised that down to 4 in the plan that's been put forward for you this evening.
Thank you. How will the money be spent? $4 million, as Mr. Alfred just identified, will be spent in bonds. Another $295,900 will be transferred from the South Road Fund to our capital improvement fund, the school's capital improvement fund. The South Road Fund is a revenue that is generated from the lease of South Road, of the building at South Road. These funds can only be used for renovation and repairs associated with the South Road facility. We also have some undesignated fund balance from our general operating fund that we have transferred. We will be transferring to the capital improvement that will also supplement these projects in the upcoming years. Some of the planned upgrades do provide opportunities to have some energy efficiency savings through the replacement of both the Matunic and West Kingston Elementary Schools heating systems. Those heating systems are currently electric, and we are exploring what would be the best for those facilities as we move forward with those repairs. The project timetable, when RIDE approves a facilities plan, it's usually a 5 or 6 year plan. So what we have before us and what's been approved is what we plan to complete, and we anticipate completing most of the work, if not all of it, by August 31st, 2019, at the end of that summer construction season. There may be a few other projects that we may hang over that we need complete through the end of that fiscal year, but by the end of that fiscal year, most, if not all, the projects will be completed. The source of funding for these projects is the $4 million from approved bond. We have $295,900 from the South Road Capital Reserve Fund, and then also our own capital reserve fund of $939,300, giving us a total of $5.2 million. As required by RIDE, we need to have a building committee. The building committee is made up of myself, the maintenance director, a superintendent, a school committee member, the planning, a planning employee, town planner, the principal of the specific schools that we're doing the projects on. The last 2 years, we've had a former principal, Mr. McCarthy, serve in that capacity, and also we have a couple of community members. For this past current fiscal year, fiscal 15-16, which we've completed, like I said, most of the work during the summer construction season, the revenue associated with these particular projects was from the school undesignated fund balance that was transferred to the capital fund. What we did was we did the high school corridor and third floor renovation. We have some life safety work we'll be doing at West Kingston, Wakefield, the Matunic, and Curtis Corner Middle School. And also we have some other minor repairs at the Curtis Corner Middle School. Future work in the year that we're discussing, presented to you this evening, as well as the rest of the capital, is fiscal 2016-17. The revenue source also will be the South Road fund balance. The same thing, the school department undesignated fund balance transferred to the capital improvement fund, and bond proceeds. The bulk of this work that we anticipate doing in the upcoming fiscal year in the construction season this summer, late spring, early summer, will be roof repairs to the 4 elementary schools. We'll be doing paving work at Curtis Corner and the West Kingston Elementary School, site drainage at West Kingston Elementary and the Matunic Elementary School. The following will outline the projects. Highlighted in yellow is the fiscal year that we're proposing, 16-17. The column to the left of that is the current fiscal year, and then it has out the remaining 6 years. The Hazard School, we do not anticipate any projects in this current capital plan. South Road, and I want to just clarify, this is relating to the bond money. I will have others that slide further with non-bond money. South Road, we do not anticipate any funds from bond money during, in this capital plan. The same thing is true for the admin building. The high school, we've done a number of projects, like I said, in the past 2 years. This current year, we'll be doing some mechanical room renovation, and it will be the out years of the original roof replacement in 1920. Curtis Corner Middle School, we don't anticipate any work in the current year. We are looking to replace the unit ventilators in the out years of 19 and 20. We do have some work that we will be looking to do in the current fiscal year to the tune of $75,000. Broad Rock Middle School, we'll be looking to do just $20,000 with exterior masonry repair to that school, and another $25,000 in emergency fixture repairs in the out years. Matunic Elementary School, this current year, we're looking to replace the roof at Matunic to the tune of $324,000. We have some foundation repairs and some drainage repairs we'll be doing. Like I said, this year, this upcoming fiscal year that we presented, we'll be repairing the roofs at 4 of our elementary schools. The bulk of these roofs, 2 of the roofs are 1997 vintage, the other 2 are 1991. So we are looking to, some of the roofs are approaching 30 years old, so we're looking to replace those roofs. Peacedale will be doing the, in out years, we'll have a roof replacement in 1920. That is not slated for this year like the other 4 elementary schools. Wakefield, we are looking to replace that roof to the tune of $291,000 for the upcoming fiscal year. We anticipate replacing unit ventilators to the tune of $43,200, and then we have $25,000 in the out years. West Kingston Elementary School, we're looking to replace that roof, $324,000. We also have some site work we're anticipating doing there, $70,800. West Kingston is one of that we'll be looking at the electrical in the out years, and that's looking to be about $1 million. The non-bonding projects in the coming fiscal year.
Miriam, before we go further, I just want to make a couple of comments. The project costs that are listed here for each of those different project elements is an estimate going back to 2013. Until there's actual review of the roofs made or the electrical systems, whether or not those are viable cost estimates at this point is yet to be seen. We've seen some variations on some of the 2013 numbers that came forward with RGB on projects that have been done to date. Some have been under, some have been a little bit over. But again, I want to stress the fact that on capital improvement program project identification, we're identifying a project and trying to get the best estimates as possible, but sometimes until you start dealing with the roof, you're really not going to be sure what the overall costs are going to be. So these are pricing estimates that we believe we can live with. The ones that I have the most concern with is the West Kingston and Matunic schools, the electrical systems. That price has not been updated, and in fact, that goes back probably 8 to 10 years. And it was used by RGB as a placeholder. So until we do the analysis on what improvements are actually going to be warranted there, I'm not sure why that number is the same number that it was several years ago. But we're going to, we'll identify the project, we'll work with the school department in terms of trying to come up with better cost estimates as we get closer to it.
The non-bonding projects that we are slated for the upcoming fiscal year is the Curtis Corner repaving the parking lot, $110,000. The West Kingston parking lot, $150,000, and obviously the roof replacement at Curtis Corner, roof replacement at South Road, $295,000. In the out years here, we're looking to replace the boiler at Curtis Corner Middle School in the year 21-22. So, total projects for the fiscal year the fiscal year we're coming in, that we just are in that we're in currently, we spent about $538,000. We anticipate this coming year spending about $1.8 million. In 17-18, a little over $1 million. Same thing for 18-19. 19-20, it's about $1.1 million. And then 21-22, $225 million. As it relates to our current, what I call pay-as-you-go capital projects, the district has a technology committee. The committee includes representatives of mostly teachers, parents, and administrators. There's the financial work group, which is led by myself. We have hardware, software, which is led by Doug Snow, our IT director. Curriculum and professional development, which is led by Pauline Lisi, our assistant superintendent, and our STEM coordinator. That position is currently vacant. We also have our own internal South Kingston School District Capital Planning Committee. We meet a couple of times a year to discuss capital improvements and develop this plan. Includes myself, Terry Lynch, the athletic director, Bob DeRoja, our maintenance director, Doug Snow, the technology director, and Superintendent Stringfield. This upcoming year, in the pay-as-you-go capital improvements that we are proposing, is a telephone, a communication program, $25,000. We're looking to replace office computer equipment. These are computers for staff. They're mainly front office staff at the schools or at central office, $15,000. Computer equity replacement of $80,000. Most of this replacement is directed towards our elementary schools. And then the student computer initiative, the one-to-one initiative, will be for the upcoming freshman class, the freshman class of September 2016. We have some network hardware, which includes servers, routers, switches, and upgrades that we'll do during the course of the year. And finally, we're looking for $45,000 to replace the backboards that are over 30 years old in the gymnasium at the high school.
Sorry. On the page, it says school department total for the 2021-2022 year. Was that $225,000, or there was an extra zero? I just want to make sure. Okay. I was like, wow, that's a lot. I have another question, if that's all right. Knowing that some of these estimates could change, especially the one for the electrical update, have you prioritized and thought about what projects you can push back if this estimate comes back, or some of these estimates come back higher than you anticipate? Or is there anything that's so urgent you can't push back?
Marion, is that on?
Lost I thought. We've already started identifying and looking into the heating issue. We do recognize that that has been one particular item with the electric heat there, what we would possibly be doing there. So we do recognize that's something we will have to look into.
I think the key here is that the reason we do the capital budget on a yearly basis is so that we can make the necessary adjustments and adjust the project costs, and it may be the funding sources that need to be augmented if those projects are more expensive than had been anticipated. What we would also hope is that as the reimbursements come in on the 35%, that those would also pay down some of future costs.
So, just so I understand, the number that's in here that you referenced as a placeholder for the electrical updates, is that how we usually go about designing the capital improvement plan, that we don't update that over the course of time?
The only way you would update that is to have the engineering study done for the actual improvement,
Okay,
and they have not completed that work.
okay.
Looking at electricity and roofs, I was wondering if any of the committees looked at I think it's a program offered by the Office of Energy Resources called Solar Schools. And that program essentially, from what people tell me, provides solar panels for free for school buildings.
We're just beginning to explore, looking at some of the alternative energy sources such as solar. The bid specifications that we are putting together and will be presented as relates to the roofs will include the opportunity to possibly include, make sure the roof would support solar panels. So we are exploring that.
Any other questions on what was presented so far?
I had been curious about the laptop initiative, and I certainly am interested to hear what you all think about it. I will say that I asked a few professionals that I know, the kids in the high school, and I was pleased to hear that they really like them. The kids I talked to said they do find them useful. I asked how are they using them in school, are they using them at home, and they really were. They said there were a couple of classes that aren't really utilizing them as much as like math. They said, you know, math is math, you're not really using the laptops there, but I was pleased and they seemed to really like them. So I've gotten really good feedback with the laptops, and I think, you know, the high school students are the ones to ask for it because they always give you the straight answers. So I was pleased with what I heard about that program.
Thank you. Excuse me. I had approached the chair earlier and explained that after Marianne concludes the capital piece, and we certainly have Mr. DeRocha and Mr. Snow in the audience if you wanted to ask detailed questions about what was already presented. After those questions have been resolved, I'm prepared, and I've given you all this lovely like pink packet that has questions you asked at the last town council meeting, the email questions that two councilmen forwarded to us, the concept of what it would look like to close Curtis Corner Middle School, a PowerPoint. These are not going to be PowerPoints up there. Everyone can have their own paper copy. We have plenty for the audience as well. Class size questions that you raised, transportation analysis that you raised, a DLI update that you raised, a one-to-one update that you raised. So it's coming.
So we'll have to go home and read it all, yeah?
Oh, no, I'm going to go over it tonight.
Oh, good, excellent. That's good.
So yeah, if there's no other questions on Mary Ann's presentation, I'd welcome.
You're ready for me. And but if there's anything else more detailed, I can let these gentlemen go home if you don't have any more questions relative to the capital projects.
The only question I would ask is, I see you put in for the backboards at the high school. I know that high school gymnasium is so old. Is that going to be enough to keep it current? Is there anything else you see coming forward for that gymnasium to get it up to speed?
So it really all depends on what you define as up to speed. If you take a look at some of the neighboring gymnasiums, North Kingstown, let's say, we're never going to be able to make our infrastructure look like that without building a new high school and without building a new gym. But I think that Terry Lynch has done a wonderful job of making our structure as pleasantly looking and as functional as possible. And so we feel we've already done the floors and the bleachers and now the backboards where we're accommodating it as best we can in an older building. Could be.
Okay, well then,
All
there
right.
are no other questions left.
Thank you, Mr. DeRocha and Mr. Snow. Have a good evening. And the first piece, so you have 7 items in your packet. I'm going to go in numerical order. The first one, first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for allowing me to attend my youngest son's honor evening as the MVP football player from our community and in the state. Tonight, as my Irish luck would have it, is his all-state, all-league banquet. I said, I think there's something going on between the Town Council and the Rhode Island Interscholastic League, but I'm happy to join you this evening. I did watch the Town Council meeting over and over, so I hope that I'm prepared for the questions that you had last time, and they're there in writing for you. And Mary Ann, if you wouldn't mind, as I go, just taking one stack, so this would be pile number 1, and making them available to the community. Or you could, yes, that would be excellent, thank you. So the first question was on our per pupil expenditure, and the question came from Councilman Veely. We have fiscal year 2014 is the most updated information on the RIDE website. It's showing our per pupil as $17,894. It was previously $18,035. We are the 17th highest public school district in Rhode Island. Last year, we were the 8th. I think when I arrived here, we were like the 2nd. Mr. Ville also asked a question on DLI and one-to-one, and I have those as separate reports. Councilman Clow spoke of the DLI plan for middle school and high school. I've included that in the DLI review. Councilman Gledhill asked, do we have a system in place as to why families leave South Kingstown for charters? And no, we do not know when they register in a charter school. We receive bills long after they've registered, long after the school year starts, from the Career and Technical Center and from the Met. And we receive a list of the number of students who are involved in charter schools, but no one provides us with contact information. There's no statewide mechanism for sharing this information with us, and typically, so they're sort of just, there's 30 kids here or there's 3 kids here, but we don't have any of the contact information.
So if like a family that's already enrolled in our South Kingstown school, any one of the public schools, decides they want to leave and go to a charter school, there's no, like, you guys don't get notified of that?
So typically, they don't make mention of that to us directly. They disenroll their child, and then the school secretary sends the records.
Okay.
Sometimes what happens, particularly with very young students entering kindergarten, they might put their name on a charter school list for the lottery. They might stay on the list for the waiting list. They might put the name on a private school list, and they might also register in our kindergarten. So they're holding 3 slots simultaneously and make decisions largely in late August. So we don't really have, it's not like we have a database that we
Right.
could draw from to say these people left to homeschool, these people left to charter, these people left to career and technical, these people left for private school, and then others, of course, who would move to different communities.
Right. I guess the only reason why I was interested in, Keith and I kind of talked about this a little bit, even if it's a small percentage of people that are leaving, or if a parent decides that they'd rather homeschool than stay, I think that, you can argue that it's a big expense to them, both in time and money sometimes, depending on where they're sending their student. So I would just want to make sure that we're meeting all the needs of our families, or we find out, if somebody's unhappy and that's why they decide to homeschool, well, why are they doing that? I mean, even if it's a small percentage of people, I think it's an
Certainly.
important thing to cover.
Last year, we had some social work interns who worked with Rhode Island College and our professional social workers and Assistant Superintendent Pauline Lisi, who actually did start making contact with some of the families whose information we had. We don't have, I mean, the interns are free, and they come here to learn. And so this was a wonderful way to try it on. But we don't really have staff members whose role would be dedicated to such a survey. But it has been mentioned. Pauline is certainly thinking about a way she could systemize it. But you know, we had a few homeschool families attend some recent school committee meetings, and when this question was asked by one of our school committee members, they responded and said, it's nothing that you're doing. We decided to homeschool because it's our value system, or it's our religious belief, or we want to be home with our children and not send them off for 6 hours with other people. And so you could have a wonderful program, but our program is our family program.
Oh, and I'm certainly
So-
not implying that you guys are doing something wrong. I just want to make sure that we know that when people leave, well, you know, that they're not leaving because we are missing something.
Thank you. So, and I'm not sure how you'd like to do this, but we might need sleeping bags if after every one of the questions.
Sorry.
No, I'm not. It's your meeting. I just want to let you know and prepare you for, we can go back and forth if the chair permits, or if you want me to get through one, ask all the questions, go on to the other one, whatever is your pleasure. It's certainly your meeting. Councilman Clow said, last year there was a concern about level staffing in our libraries. Surprisingly, requiring a librarian full-time at all times in each school is in legislation that was signed yesterday, which is quite exciting. How will this impact the increase of the new FTEs? So I'm assuming that what you were speaking of in terms of legislation is the federal ESSA, which is the Every School Succeeds Act. That's the latest rewrite of the ESEA, which was the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It's the first piece of federal legislation for public schools in over 50 years. It's the mechanism that provides us with Title I funding, Title II, IDEA funding. It's federal restricted aid, access through something we write called the Consolidated Resource Plan. For your knowledge, it's not a new revenue stream. The criteria to access the federal funds, the restricted funds, has changed, and it is changed every time it's reauthorized. So, you know, back in the very long time ago, we had Eisenhower funds. The idea was we wanted to be the first on the moon, and we're going to spend all this Title II money on technology, and then it was reauthorized, and we'd gone to the moon, and we decided we're going to still focus on science, but also math, and then that turned into teacher quality money, into reduction in class size money, and now it's PD money. So the funding streams sort of stay the same, but the criteria updates when the world updates. So I reviewed ESSA, and I cross-referenced it to the American Library Association website and the Department of Ed, and these are the only references that I could find having to do with library. Of course, it's a extensive document that, you know, I did library as a fine change. So please know it's not a library-only legislation. Librarian is now in a definitions category included as a specialized instructional support personnel. That was a change. They're encouraging new and innovative roles for librarians, including the integration of technology and curating digital curriculum. They speak to the importance of school libraries and their transition from books and paper to a blended digital resource. They speak to a lack of school libraries and librarians in the nation, because in most states, which I didn't know, school libraries are optional. So for example, on the American Library Association site, it said that Florida's single state regulation is to have a library. So there was a library media specialist in Auburndale, Florida, who was quoted saying, "Here in Florida, I could hire a librarian to show up once a month with a box of books and call it a program, and that would be acceptable, unfortunately." And she said Florida is not alone. So this legislation was written to eradicate that concept of what a school librarian is, to certainly raise it to the level of importance that it is truly entitled to. The ALA reports that librarians should provide students with opportunities to develop digital literacy skills. In South Kingstown, Title I is based on poverty, so you get money depending upon the level of poverty that you have. We don't have a lot of poverty, therefore we don't get a lot of Title I money. It is given It's not a large revenue stream, but it's spent on reading programs for students who are identified as needing a PLP or a personal literacy plan. Title II is our smallest allocation. In some states, librarians have not been historically invited into professional development. In our community, all of our teachers are provided professional development, so that wouldn't have a change for us because we're already doing that. Title II also encourages, in this reauthorization, all districts to have a common planning time for all teachers K through 12. In most districts and states, common planning time is focused on middle school and high school, and librarians wouldn't have access to that. In our school department, for many years, we've had common planning time K to 12. Title IV, for which we do not currently qualify, authorizes states to use some money for internet connectivity, and then that will give more children the opportunity to access libraries. In South Kingstown, we have wireless access in every school, so that wouldn't help us. Title IV funds can now also be used to support extended library hours, which would be wonderful. We will not know until May if we will even qualify for Title I funding, but it's certainly something that can be considered when Pauline does the CRP. I did not find any information on the American Library Association or the U.S. Department of Ed or RIDE website about the requirement of a full-time librarian at every school. If I'm not referring to the legislation that you were referring to, I'm happy to take a look at it if you could email it to me.
Yeah, I don't think I said it required a full-time librarian. I thought I said it supported that idea.
You could have. I
Yeah.
did try to play it over and over again
Yeah,
and get the
I
right
mean-
terminology, but if I misquoted you, it was not my intent.
But
So I don't think it's going to have any effect on our requirements
Right.
for staffing.
But I appreciate you looking at.
Well, it was actually very enjoyable to seek out the new information. Councilman Clow asked the status of our social workers. We have the same amount of social workers that we had last year and a decline in enrollment. There were no cuts made last year. There are no cuts anticipated in this budget. We have 5.3 school psychologists, 4 social workers, 8.5 speech language pathologists, 1 physical therapist, and 5 occupational therapists. And I showed you last year a district, the number of special educators, the students on IEPs, and the caseload average. So I provided that for you again. The special ed director is recommending the increase in occupational therapy of a 0.3 FTE based on the IEPs that we have. And just as a reminder, there are no staffing level requirements in Rhode Island. All mental health and special education support is contained in the special ed staffing plan that is created by the special education director in consultation with the special education faculty. Social workers are considered in the special education faculty, and that is also per school committee policy. You all reviewed, Mrs. Clow had asked, has there been a budget cut to music recently? Mrs. Mosier was correct in her response. There was no budget cut to music. The high school program, like all high school courses, is based on student choice. In addition, although the high school music department has seen a reduction in student interest, we have added 0.2 FTE to this anticipated budget in an effort to hire a full-time band director to attract the very best band director to South Kingstown High School that we possibly can. Mrs. Clow asked about library cuts and teacher assistant cuts. There were no library cuts last year. As you may recall, the only teacher position cuts last year, even with decreasing enrollment, were at the high school. The FTEs, the partial FTEs were decreased. That were decreased are non-teaching periods. They were periods of non-teaching time in a few core departments where teachers were extremely hard at work developing curriculum and units of study. Unfortunately, there were some minimal TA cuts, but no active teacher assistance positions were cut. We actually had many positions last year in this bargaining unit due to retirements and promotion to clerical position. And of course, all of the budget cuts that were reviewed with the town council at our several meetings went through. We did need to add special education teacher assistant support after the budget was passed because new students presented with some new needs, and those had to be incorporated into their IEPs. Councilman Gledhill asked, I'm aware that over the last 5 years, the band participation declined. Is that with the increase in standardized testing and portfolio? I would be interested to see if it relates. High school band numbers declined due to student choice. Standardized testing in South Kingstown has actually decreased. At one of our most recent school committee meetings, we have presented an assessment matrix that was actually responsive to Representative Teresa Tanzi's House bill on assessment. So we sent our assessment matrix out to every school department in Rhode Island. I believe the council received a copy of it. It is posted on board docs and on our website as a model to show other communities that there should be transparency in the amount of testing that's done in a school department, that the administrators, along with the educators, should take a look at a K through 12 assessment system to see if there's any duplication of efforts or any redundancy that can be eliminated, and we've done that. The portfolio piece that you speak of is actually the same as it was in 2004 when the Rhode Island Department of Education created the proficiency-based requirement system. It's substantively the same system we had in 2005. 2004 and 2005, and we are actually one of the only high schools in the state that offers an actual course to help students with their portfolio. In most other high schools, they're doing their portfolio assignments in their regular English class or their regular science class. They don't have that additional support mechanism. We have a one-quarter course in 9th through 12th with a certified teacher solely focused on portfolio. Mrs. Gledhill asked, park literacy is at 38%. Do you think that the high school class sizes of 25 and 26 has something to do with it? Is staffing adequate at the high school? So I did a whole class size presentation for you, but in fact, high school class sizes are not 25 and 26. Certainly there are some classes at the high school that are 25, 26, and even 27. Contractually, the limit is 27. The average class size at the high school is actually the second smallest cohort in our district. The smallest class size is at kindergarten. And as referenced in our press release and in my interview on Newsmakers and in the local newspapers and at school committee meetings, high school park scores both in literacy and math are not consistent with what we see the students doing in their course grades, their AP scores, their SAT and STAR scores, and even in their midterms and finals. So our high school faculty and staff are working to find incentives so that students will try their best on these assessments. So for example, my son has interest in doing well on the SATs because he knows that will be a direct factor into the college that he's getting into. We need to show the children that it's really important that you show us what you know, because then that affects the placement of your course next year, or it could in fact affect your graduation rate if the state doesn't change their requirements right now. Last year, Mr. Collins asked, last year we talked about the achievement gap. Do we have those numbers? I do have them in another piece. Oh, actually, it's right here. So realize that this is the first year of the park. I'm sure everyone realizes that. In order to define a gap, there has to be 15-point discrepancy between the two categories, and the end size of the cell needs to be 10 or more so that it's not personally identifiable to a child or it's not reported. So we do have a poverty gap in grades 3 through 10 and overall. Sometimes the gaps are less than they were on the kneecap, sometimes they're larger. I need to let you know that we created this gap spreadsheet for you. We have not received anything officially from RIDE, so I'm working with raw data right now. So I hope I did well in presenting it to you. Poverty gap also is present, unfortunately, in all areas. In English language arts. We didn't have a math gap for disability in grade 8. It was overall, not that many students actually took the grade 8s, about 25% of our students that are not in Algebra 1. And so there is a gap in Algebra 1, but not a gap in grade 8, not a gap in geometry. So this is what we're working on right now, trying to drill down to specifically within those categories, what are the bands that our children are not doing well on? Are there trends from year to year? Are there trends only in one year that we can provide some professional development or interventions for? And we, as you know, have a gap closing task force, and our next meeting is next week, I believe, and so we'll have recommendations for that. Councilman Clow, I'm aware a lot of schools functioning with empty classrooms. Reconfiguring Broad Rock has caused open space in elementary schools. Have you ever had a discussion to close Curtis Corner with grade 5 going back to the elementary school, Broad Rock 6, 7, 8? I'm wondering budget-wise if it would make sense. We are functioning with a lot of schools, and I created a PowerPoint to showcase some of the big ideas in investigating that. You also asked, I'm hearing the talk about empty classrooms and lots of space. I love the elementary schools, but Broad Rock is underutilized. We've tried different configurations at that school, including just grade 6. I don't think the building is being used in the way it was intended, and you're absolutely correct. When Broad Rock was built, Curtis Corner and the elementary schools were bursting at the seams. 6th grade was moved to the middle school, and the town was split with half of the students, 6, 7, 8 at Curtis Corner and half at Broad Rock. That's how it was intended to be used. Then in 2005, you closed South Road. 2007, South Kingstown added a full-day K, which came for a double need for classrooms at the elementary level and a double need for teachers and some teacher assistants. In 2009, Curtis Corner and Broad Rock were reconfigured to save money. Then Superintendent Hicks had all 7th and 8th grade students in the town move to Curtis Corner, and only 6th grade occupied Broad Rock on the 2nd floor, which I thought was an interesting choice. The entire 1st floor of Broad Rock, the newest building in the fleet, was vacant, and that was certainly a time when Broad Rock was underutilized. In 2010-11, we moved 5th grade to the empty 1st floor of Broad Rock, and in 2012, Skip moved to South Road. And I have in the closing of South Road concept exactly how many empty classrooms there are in every school. Mrs. Clow asked, I heard the DLI wish, which was a concern. Several of us felt it was not an equitable solution. You convinced us that they could access the program. The buzz I'm hearing is that people are not happy. They want it in each neighborhood school. I appreciate that you're not bringing that to us right now. I would love to see Spanish at each school. All South Kingstown kindergarten students had access to DLI last year, certainly not in their home school, but access. I agree it would be optimal to have the program at every school. We began the program at the 2 highest poverty schools in an effort to provide as much equity as possible and in deference to parents' ability to transport based on level of poverty. It was very hard for families to elect to leave their neighborhood school, and the school committee and administration are investigating possibilities for expansion due to the high demand of the program that the parents have expressed. Just last night, we determined that our next step is to actually identify who really is requesting this. So on the application for DLI, if you're a parent of an entering kindergarten student at Peacedale or at Matunic, you know, where will you go and where must you go? And so we're hoping that that data can give us a window into the actual demand. Mr. Collins, I don't know why I put you here as able, but I apologize for that. We are not demanding Curtis Corner close. People just want to see if it would help. Would it create savings for our schools? Parents would rather have teachers in buildings rather than keeping buildings open, and that'll be addressed. Mrs. Clow said you would probably lose an administrator. Our librarians are already not full-time. The savings are in transportation, administration, and building maintenance. We would not likely lose an administrator. The preschool is required to have a coordinator by RIDE accreditation standards, so conceptually, if you were to close Curtis Corner, you would need to open South Road, and I'll show that to you. The preschool would have to move to Peacedale. It's the only other place I can fit them. That was not an option popular with preschool parents or Peacedale parents or our faculty when we investigated it in 2010. Peacedale would be at capacity, so right now they only have a principal. They don't have an assistant principal at all, so we would need to add a full-time assistant principal, and then we would need to have a principal at South Road. So it wouldn't be there. When you close a building, the savings are in personnel. We were still required to maintain the South Road building after you closed that. We lost our housing aid to the town forever, and it will never be returned. There was a significant increase in vandalism that required us to purchase surveillance cameras, and we had to make significant repairs to the buildings and grounds and cameras. Mrs. Gledhill asked for a transportation analysis. I've prepared that for you. Mrs. Klaus said, I love Broad Rock Middle School, and it is underutilized. We had to pull grade 5 out, and now all of the elementary schools have empty classrooms. We just built Broad Rock. It is underutilized. We have recess rooms in all of the elementary schools. I wasn't here, but I believe we built Broad Rock in 2001, which was 15 years ago. And I'm going to reference it in the Curtis Corner closing PowerPoint, but the only school in the district with a recess room is Matunic, because I've walked them all the day after the town council meeting. Would you like to ask
I'm
questions?
showing my age saying it, we just built it.
Say it again,
I'm
please.
showing my age saying we just built it 15
Well, you
years
know what,
ago.
it's funny because for me, having to live through, quite frankly, reading every school committee minutes and every PowerPoint I prepared my first year here, which was 7 years ago, it was almost like post-traumatic stress because it seems like yesterday. So I can appreciate that time escapes us. But I know I wasn't here then. So, so the next one is taking a look at, I received email questions from, through the manager, from Councilman Gledhill and Councilman Clow. Just going to sip a little Diet Coke.
Before we get to it, Kristen, if
Sure.
there are any questions on that first packet that aren't related to the facilities issue, then I think we should ask them now, just while it's fresh. Any questions on that first packet? Okay, thanks.
So,
Hold on
Yeah.
one second.
I might show my ignorance, but it's just a clarifying question. Is No Child Left Behind, that's not considered federal education legislation?
it is.
Okay.
But I think what
I just was reading
Clow
where it says the first piece of federal education legislation in over 50 years.
in terms of, that's how it was stated on the USDOE website. I think they were
Okay.
referencing ESEA translating into ESSA.
Okay, I was just kind of surprised at that statement, but
I
I
would
hear you.
take it up with
Yeah.
the-
No, that's fine,
the
okay,
US
I just want to
government.
clarify that.
All right. So the next set of questions was emailed to me. Councilman Gledhill said, I know that because of the DLI classrooms, our kindergarten class sizes have shrunk. I also understand that any classroom with less than 20 kindergarten students loses a full-time teacher's aide and instead receives a part-time one. I'd also like to see the trend statewide or district-wide as to any classrooms with less than 20 kindergarten students loses a full-time aide, and how it's changed over the years. So some of this will certainly be covered in the DLI report, but although, as discussed last year when this was a piece of budget, that's how the school committee was comfortable bringing it forth, being very transparent to the community and to the town that we were implementing a brand-new program. But it is conceptually budget neutral because we are swapping out a English-only teacher for a Spanish-speaking teacher. And over the years, through attrition, that's how we've shown to be able to make certain that none of our staff are losing their jobs for this. That's our hope. The first year, being that it's so new, we wanted to make certain that we provided 2 budget positions for teachers so that there would not be initial anxiety and concern. And that did de facto lower everybody's kindergarten class size in the town, which I think was a good thing, to be honest. And so that's one piece. I showed you all of the different sections at each of the schools, which you can certainly look to. The confusion about the contract is this. We don't take them away. They're only allowed, teacher assistants are contractually afforded to a kindergarten program when the enrollment is more than 20. So absent DLI, last year, the year previous, if the kindergarten enrollment is less than 20, then it's up to the building principal to take a look at his or her teacher assistants in the building and deploy them based on the greatest need. So you could have a kindergarten with 11 students in it, and they only need perhaps an hour of support, but you could have a 3rd grade that is packed full with lots of different reading and mathematical needs or behavior supports needed. So it's building-based decisions, but if there are 20, then automatically a full-time teacher assistant is assigned. I'll be honest, having a class size of 13 is kind of optimal for a kindergarten teacher. So, but if you have 20 little ones running around, you certainly need the expertise of an assistant. So I've given you the contract language here so that you can take a look at it. I also did a comparison of other, I couldn't do what you asked in terms of a 10-year trend. Other people don't give me their data. And we don't retain the data that says exactly where, Mrs. Mosher worked as a teacher assistant, how much time she spent walking in here and walking in there. And so what I could show you is that for comparison to other school departments, we seem to have very nice class sizes. Certainly there are some that are a little over and some that are much, much higher, but I thought it would be helpful. It was certainly helpful to me. Some of them that really stood out to me is some high school classes go as high as 37. And I can't even quite imagine that as a teacher myself. In North Smithfield Kindergarten, the highest is 26. So these are significant class sizes. And then East Greenwich, K through 3 is 20. And so that's something certainly to aspire to. So also in the review of every other Rhode Island teacher contract, I couldn't find any other teacher contracts in the state that cross bargaining units. So we're unique in that one collective bargaining agreement entitles workers of another collective bargaining agreement. And that's been a long-standing tradition here, that the negotiations process, at least as long as I've been here, has not disturbed. But that's, I think, a wonderful thing. I think there's really two reasons that was put in. One, our teachers are not assigned playground, recess, lunch, arrival, and dismissal duty. Teacher assistants do that work. In many other school departments, or maybe it's not many anymore, but in other school departments, teachers have those type of duties. And the other part is truly our very deep commitment to academic support in the classroom. And so we utilize our teacher assistants at the fullest capacity possible, and the professionals that they are. They're assisting in teaching and learning, and that's quite frankly where we'd want them. Then Mrs. Gledhill went on to say, unrelated to DLI, I've heard that the school committee is considering having deans instead of vice principals at the high school. I'd like to see how the salaries compare and how the administrative duties would change from one position to another. So you are correct. During the 2016-17 academic year, the high school administration will be reconfigured. It's something that we have been working on and planning for about 3 years. Right now, we have one principal and 3 assistant principals, and that's going to change to one principal, one assistant principal for STEAM, one assistant principal for humanities, and 2 teacher deans. So the reconfiguration will mean a reduction of 1 administrator and the addition of 2 teaching positions. Each assistant principal salary range for school year 16-17 would be somewhere between $106,000 and $111,000, depending upon their qualifications and the experience of the candidate that is hired. Assistant principals work a 210-day work year, and they work school year and time over the summer and during the February vacation, April vacations. Each teacher dean's salary would be on the teacher salary scale, so between $40,000 and $90,000, again, depending upon the candidate hired. They work 182 work year. Deans do work an additional some after-school hours, so they receive a $3,000 stipend. Therefore, that salary range would be $3,000 higher. I listed some general duties so that you could get a sense. STEAM would be really the instructional leader for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. They would be responsible for evaluating teachers in those departments, RTI, personal math plans, 504 meetings, plans of supervision of events, and major discipline in grades 9 and 10. Then the assistant principal for humanities would oversee English, social studies guidance, special education, the portfolio classes, would be the teaching and learning supervisor for those departments, and also responsible for personal literacy plans, portfolio, graduation requirements, scheduling, and major discipline in grades 11 and 12. And the deans would do the similar work that Mr. Pope is doing very successfully at Curtis Corner, which is restorative practices, crisis plan, attendance, absenteeism, safety, supervising fire and lockdown drills, truancy, and daily discipline. But of course, any discipline that rose to the level of suspension or expulsions would need to be handled by an assistant principal or a principal. So and we would like to see one dean for 9 and 10 and one dean for 11 and 12, because the behavior and the transition and everything is different in early high school than in later high school. So although the information referenced above is general, it's not intended to be a job description. It's sort of a budget neutral change. It's a structural change rather than a budget change. We could end up saving quite a bit of money if we hire first step teachers, or if we hire higher step teachers, then it could cost a little bit more. But quite frankly, that's what happens every time we reach out and hire a teacher. We hire the best teacher for the position. Mrs. Gledhill asked, finally, I'm still curious as to the transportation costs, and we have a transportation analysis for you. Please note also that there is a transportation subcommittee of the school committee led by Mary Ann Crawford, and school committee members Miller and Vorhaben have volunteered to serve on that committee along with community members. They've analyzed transportation costs. They've attempted changes, some very innovative techniques with bus monitoring surveillance systems. We negotiate a competitive bid for transportation approximately every 3 years. We have the second largest transportation landmass in Rhode Island, covering over 80 square miles, which is always a factor, and I prepared a 10-year review for the council.
Did you annex Narragansett? Because we only have 63 miles here.
I think I took over Narragansett and their beautiful property wealth. 63, got it. Mrs. Clow asked, first, I'd like to know what our cost per pupil is. I already spoke to that. And what is it for our elementary, middle, and high school? I'd also know if there's a cost per pupil different for the DLI program students, and if so, what is their cost, considering they have their own administrator and training for staffing. So RIDE doesn't disaggregate by level, elementary, middle, and high. A DLI student per pupil expenditure would be the same as a general education student. The only difference is special education per pupil. That's a different figure. All teachers engage in professional development that differs by their area of expertise, their choice, and their need. The DLI ESL coordinator is not just for the DLI program. It's a person who's responsible for dual language, for ESL, for world language, K through 12. If there were no DLI program, with all the changes in ESL, we would still require some sort of an administrator or coordinator, and then I list all the different jobs that this gal does. What is the long-term plan for DLI? And I don't want to repeat myself, so I believe I do a better job of speaking to it in the DLI plan, but let me just look at the overview. So this year, it's going to be available to K and 1 students in the town. You speak of will they continue to get language-related services that are not available to other students of equal grade that are not involved in DLI? I don't know what you meant by language-related services, but they'll be taught in Spanish until in the same model, K through 5. When they move to a 6th grade model, then it's essential that one teacher on the team at least, and 6 years from now the research may say less or more, but right now it says one, be delivering the content through Spanish. And so it could be the math teacher, it could be the social studies teacher, it really doesn't matter, but it's important that they keep the language up in order to maintain their fluency. And then when they get to, and that would happen for 6 and 7, then in 8th grade, students who are not in the dual language program are put in now in 7th grade in a culture class, where they learn a variety of different cultural experiences in some language. And then in 8th grade, they have an opportunity for Spanish 1 or French 1. So that will still be the regular traditional pathway for the children not electing DLI. They can start, and then they'll go up to Spanish 5 or French 5 if they choose. Most colleges, four-year colleges, are asking for 2 years of a high school world language or more. The DLI students in 8th grade could have the potential to pass the now 12th grade AP exam and take that course. And if they elect to do that, not all children will, but if they elect to do that, then the opportunity exists for a partnership with South Kingstown and the University of Rhode Island for their high school years to be working on a Spanish minor. So they'll graduate with a seal of biliteracy, which is something we can put on our local diploma and that RIDE would endorse. And the students would be then graduating with a collegiate level of Spanish fluency in speaking, writing, and reading. And then if they didn't want to go in that path, they could take up 1 or 2 other languages and just switch over from Spanish into something else. What is the need for a full-time administrator? I wrote down that all of the work that she is doing. ESL is starting to take off everywhere in the state. The ESL regulations have changed. There's quite a bit of testing. The testing is now online, and someone needs to coordinate that and to develop the programs and train the teachers and evaluate the ESL staff. Mrs. Clow asked, what are the costs for purchasing materials and curriculum in Spanish? So we're sort of unique in that we don't have Basel textbooks and math books at the elementary level. We work with the Columbia University Reading and Writing Program, so we have real books, legitimate, authentic books that are at each child's just right reading level. So the concept that I presented to you is we're either going to buy 46 books in English or 23 books in English and 23 books in Spanish, and that's sort of the way it's been going. We also, in terms of math, we've had to translate some, if there's a ditto, we've had to translate some of the directions if it's student directions. We don't have to translate the directions if it's teacher directions because our teachers speak and read both in English and Spanish. But now kindergarten is complete, and so there'll be some work over the summer in translating for grade 1 and then the following year for grade 2, and once it's done, it's complete. We tried to utilize the URI Multicultural Center, but that was not an acceptable path for us. So we have hired our own teachers on after school who have been willing to do this work, and some of this is certainly paid for by the grant received from the Rhode Island Foundation. They're still supporting us in professional development. We have had one of our school librarians actually wrote a grant through SCEF to get DLI books in a couple of our schools, and so there are other grant funding programs that are coming forward, and our DLI coordinator is searching for more. Since the DLI children will be together for their entire school experience, with the English classroom also be grouped together by default. So the DLI students are grouped together K through 4, and then there'll be like a mini merge in 5th grade where the DLI students from both programs will be able to mix and sort together just like we do typically. And that's when all the other students will merge together. There'll be another merge if we're still reconfigured in the same way once they get to Curtis Corner, and at the high school they'll unmerge and be just joining everyone else. As far as the laptop goes, I have an entire report for you, so I think I might be done with number 2. So I will say that the third piece, which is closing scenarios for Curtis Corner, is jam-packed with a lot of information. I probably took about 30 different pieces of information from 2010, updated them, synthesized them. It's not my best work in terms of a logical flow. It seems like one long ramble, so I'll apologize for that in advance. I didn't want to forget anything. If you decide to go further with this exploration, I'm happy to heighten some areas or make things more clear.
Kristen, I actually had a question on what we just went over. So where you answered Rachel's question, number 5, about the children entering the 7th grade having the opportunity for exposure to another language. So have you given any thought to any classes at the elementary level for children to be have the opportunity, like as an elective or as a part of their curriculum, to be exposed to language?
Yes, that's come up at School committee meetings, that's come up at key stakeholders meetings with PTO parents. And the idea is that we have elementary built-in electives. We call them itinerants. We have library, we have music, we have art, and we have double phys ed by state law. State law requires that amount of phys ed. So our instructional day does not allow us to take out anything to put in another elective. We would have to make a decision to forego one of the electives that we currently have. That is something that Matunic parents might have been interested in exploring. They were planning at some time about a month ago to put out a survey to see if it was something that their parents would be interested in looking at, but I don't believe that they did go forward with that. It is not going, that type of exposure is exposure. So it's not going to lead to fluency, it's not going to lead to native speakers, they will not become biliterate, but it's certainly an exposure to cultures and an exposure to language.
I'm just thinking about the students that, if we have a lottery system for the DLI program that might not get into it, if they would have another opportunity before they got to middle school to have that kind of, any kind of
So
exposure.
what would have to happen, though, it would have to be a whole school change.
Right.
So if we're all third grade teachers, and there's 4 children in my classroom that want to take Spanish, but the other children want to take art, then we need to know how to staff that period, that preparation period. So it can't be as simple as like an elective you'd see at the high school.
And I don't think it is. I just wanted to know if it was in the conversation, if that's.
The other thing we looked at is after-school pieces. We can't get, there is interest in every elementary school to offer after-school Spanish, and we've advertised throughout the state, and we can't find teachers that will come and do this work for us, but we'll continue to look towards supporting that.
Excuse me. I know that you had planned on doing a lottery for the DLI, but you didn't need to, am I correct?
So last year, the lottery would only happen if we had too many folks for spots.
Right.
So last year, everyone who wanted to be in DLI was able to be accommodated. I actually joked with some of the parents yesterday at the DLI informational at Skip that we're changing it to lottery/program application because we don't know. Till we receive the applicants, we don't know how many there will be. But if there is a lottery, it's going to be, I think, February 1st. So the scenario for closing
Hold on,
Curtis Corner
Chris.
Middle School, and I want to make,
Hold
oh,
on
I'm
one
sorry.
second.
I just wanted, on the West Kingston, I just want to know if the number is 17 per classroom. Is that what it has been? Or was there some, I thought it was 36, but I'm just not sure. Maybe I'm not.
36 in one classroom?
No, for the
I
DLI.
think there's 17 and 17 and 13, but I don't.
Okay, is that what it
it?
had been
You mean last year or all this year?
this year?
This year. That's what it has
Okay,
been. And
all
at Peacedale, it's bigger. At Peacedale, I think it's 19 and 20, 13, 13, and 13.
That's what it was at the beginning of the year as well?
I gave you the October 1st enrollment data because enrollment could be different today. Today, there could be 1 or 2 less students in any
Okay,
classroom.
I was really just wondering if a couple students had dropped out at West Kingston from the DLI, if they transferred or anything like that.
Not that I'm remembering.
Okay.
I know that there was one student that didn't enroll in August, but I'm not remembering that any dropped out. You might know something different than I.
I have a quick question on the DLI. I know that last year at the budget session, you had talked about this program hopefully attracting people from charter schools, from even out of town. Did you see any of that happening?
So one of the slides that I presented to the school committee last year was the fact that we have historical enrollment data. So in birth year 2010, there were 186 births to South Kingstown residents. We never expect all 186 to come, but there's a formula that NESDEC uses to project how many will come, and they're usually right within 1 or 2 students. So NESDEC projected that we would receive 177 students that would elect to come to school here in South Kingstown out of the 186. We actually enrolled 197, so 20 more students than we expected showed up in our kindergarten. That was very unusual. I have no causal or correlational data to say it's definitely because of DLI, but I do know that at child outreach and kindergarten registration and at school registration, the anecdotal information that parents were giving to the registrants, and I think some folks that came here indicated they moved here in order to do this, or they elected to not go to a private school or a charter school. Unfortunately, last year, we made the decision after budget, so many parents were very disappointed because they were pushing us to have this decision in January because they didn't want to miss the opportunity, the March 1st lottery for charter schools, or the opportunity to get their deposits in for private schools and then not have a slot to send their child if we didn't go forward with DLI. So we expect to attract more. I think we have about 10 or 15 applications already for this year.
Have you had any kids drop out of it yet?
To my knowledge, I don't recall that we had any, but I'll be honest, the numbers haven't flopped, I haven't asked, I don't think they have. The parents seem to be elated. We have some current kindergarten families who feel like, oh, I didn't even know about this. They must have missed that early talk, and I have more of an interest in a couple of parents trying to get their children in now mid-year. Okay, so
I just had it on the West Kingston again. I'm just looking at the numbers, so
didn't we talk last night, Jonathan? Did we have like a 4-hour meeting last night?
I don't know. But this is new information,
Okay, go ahead.
and it's not even really on the agenda. We're doing a lot, this whole packet is all under other matters of interest and
I
concern.
was requested by the town council to provide this information to them this evening.
All right, so I'm seeing this document for the first time.
Please go ahead.
All right. What would we do with the small class at West Kingston is 13? If 6 of those students had enrolled for the DLI, would we have held a kindergarten class of 7?
Would we have held a kindergarten class of 7? Probably not.
So what would we do in that situation?
We might have an area, well, for West Kingston is unique, because West Kingston has our ESL students, so we typically will have, in the course of the year, 2 or 3, maybe even 5 slots that we have to keep open, just, quite frankly, for ESL students to come in. So I wasn't presented with the opportunity to run a class of 7, but that could happen in any school in any year. I could next year have, at Wakefield, 7 kindergartners instead of 40 show up and be registered, and we make those decisions as we go.
It makes making placement interesting, I guess.
Well, last
Potentially.
year, we had a first grade of 11 at West Kingston, and I ran that class. That had nothing to do with the DLI. That's just how many students were in the program. All set? So Curtis Corner, and big disclaimer here, I run a public school department, I'm not a facilities auditor, but what I'm trying to do is to give you the big idea of what I know. So these are projections. It doesn't take place of an actual paid facilities audit. There would need to be a facilities audit, a certification review for our teachers, instructional audit, transportation review, boundary remapping, and housing aid recalibration. The last facilities audit for this purpose was completed in 2010. The vendor identified and recommended a school to close if it was determined that one needed to close. It was not the will of the community that a building close at that time. And I just put some questions for you to ponder if you're thinking about going forward in this area. I think this is where the school committee and the town council got a little stuck last year. Are you looking for purely a cost savings decision? Is it a monetary and educational decision? And is that possible? Is it purely an educational decision? Are you willing to support the recommendation of the facilities auditor if that's not the will of the community? So although you have in your mind the scenario that you'd like, if that doesn't come true, then you'll have paid this money, and what will you then do? So I offer 3 lenses to take a look at this information in. What will the education program look like? What will the savings be in organizing in this way? What is the preparation for high school and beyond? Big ideas that I would be telling you if you were in my Providence College school finance class is when you close a school to open another, there are no cost savings. Significant cost savings. The existing buildings in our school district are unique. Their size, their layout, where they were placed in the town, some buildings that we own, some buildings that if we vacated would go back to the estate of a family. The high school and Matunic are 2. The different housing aid reimbursement and the value on each and every building, the land, if there is an ability to expand, which there isn't, and the facilities themselves. All of these factors make it very difficult to close a building in this district and maintain educational effectiveness. When you close a school, you either have to commit to selling it or commit to maintaining it. Maintaining an empty building, we found, was very costly, but if you sell the building, you're likely in this market to sell to an educational competitor who will then take more teaching positions away from the town and more revenue away. So the savings in closing a school are largely in personnel. Typically, a reduction is in front office staff, custodial staff, a nurse, a librarian, itinerant, partial FTEs, and sometimes an administrator if you don't need to open another school to accommodate the closing. We're not permitted to share site maps of our buildings publicly per the Rhode Island State Police because relative to our district crisis plan, you don't want to give the site plans and directions out to someone who might mean harm to a school building. So what I have prepared for you is sort of a room-by-room site plan and space. So the first site that we can examine is Curtis Corner. Curtis Corner is bigger than Broad Rock by 20,000 square feet. Curtis Corner is full. It has one available classroom where English language arts and technology coaches are currently working. It has 45 full-size classrooms. One, the fitness room, is a double room. It could be made into 2 rooms, but right now it's a double room. We have a maintenance room where the maintenance directors store all of their supplies, and they do their, they cut wood in there, and that could be transformed into a regular classroom. We've looked at that before, but it's significantly costly to do that, like hundreds of thousands. So we didn't do it. Curtis Corner uses 24 interchangeable classrooms, which could be like a reading room or well, I'll show you how they're used. We have 3 that are grade 7 social studies, 3 grade 8 social studies, a reading classroom, a full-size class is needed for the number of students in the class at the time, 3 grade 7 English arts, 3 grade 8 English arts, 3 math, 3 8th grade math, a math interventionist full-size classroom needed, and 2 world language rooms. Curtis Corner has 21 specialized rooms, 7 science labs. 1 is the one that's empty, that's being used as the coach's room, a family consumer science room used now as a writing lab, an art room, a band room, a fitness health double room, another health room, chorus and orchestra room, 2 computer labs, 2 full-size special needs classrooms, 1 full-size alternative learning pathway classroom with toileting, a library, and a computer lab that potentially could be divided but is not, for a total of 21 specialized rooms. It has a 3/4 size class conference room, 12 small spaces that house a student assistance counselor, in-school suspension, the dean, the assistant principal, 4 special needs teachers, occupational therapist and physical therapist. And some spaces are shared. Next slide shows Broad Rock site plan. Broad Rock is not what I would call underutilized. It only has 1 available classroom, and quite frankly, it was in case another 5th grade is added, because typically in any given year we go from 10 to 12 5th grades, and this year we have 10. That room is currently shared by the in-school suspension students, the math, literacy, and technology coach. So although there are people inhabiting it, it certainly can be viewed as an empty classroom. On the first floor of Broad Rock, we have an occupational therapy room, a fitness room, 2 self-contained special needs classrooms, 10 grade 5 classrooms, an art room, a family consumer science room used for music. We have a band room, an orchestra and chorus room, in-school suspension room, as I indicated, which next year will likely be a grade 5, but now is shared by the math coach and the technology coach. On the second floor, we have 3 of every social studies, math, and ELA, 6th grade. We have 6 science labs. We have we have 3 grade 6 science labs, and then another science lab used by the writing teacher. So there are 4 science labs at Broad Rock. We have a library and computer lab off the library. That's a 3/4 room, but could be divided if needed. We have a geometry and statistics intervention room, a health room, and an ALP room with special needs students. There are 10 interchangeable first-floor rooms, 11 interchangeable second-floor rooms. We have 8 static special rooms on the first floor, like including the art room, the music room, and on the second floor they would be like the science labs and such. A total of 35 large rooms, On the second floor, we have small spaces for the assistant principal and the in-school suspension, 3 special needs teachers, small spaces, a reading teacher, small space, and a speech-language therapist. On the first floor, we have space for the ELL teacher, 2 special needs teacher, the reading teacher for 5th grade, guidance counselor, and then they have a very small conference room. Total large 35, total small 12. It's not 7 of which are science labs. There are 4 science labs. That's an error. So this is the space comparison. Curtis Corner has 24 interchangeable classrooms. Broad Rock has 21. Curtis Corner has 21 static classrooms, 7 of which are science labs. Broad Rock has 14, 4 of which are science labs. I got to know our buildings more intimately than I knew the day after the town council meeting. They were not pleased to see me. 45 full-size classrooms at Curtis Corner, 35 at Broad Rock, 1 3/4 space for a conference room at Curtis Corner, 12 small spaces, 12 small spaces also at Broad Rock, so 58 rooms, 1 available if needed to be divided, and 47 at Broad Rock, 1 available if needed to be divided. So the next slide is simple. Can 6, 7, 8 fit at Broad Rock? Right now, grade 6, 7, 8 program is using 80 full-size and 24 small space and 1 3/4 conference room at Curtis Corner for a total of 6, 7, and 8, remember. So I want to confuse myself. The 6th grade at Broad Rock and the 7th and 8th grade kids are totally using 80 full-size classrooms. Broad Rock has 35. And 12 small spaces. So even if I put art on a cart, music on a cart, health on a cart, world language on a cart, the 6, 7, 8 students for a time not yet identified will not fit. And the next one is, can 7 and 8 fit? So right now, the 7-8 program is using 45 full-size classrooms, 1 3/4 conference room, and 12 small spaces, and a total of 58 spaces. Broad Rock has a total of 47. We need 6 science labs for 7th and 8th grade students. We have 4 at Broad Rock. Therefore, 2 grade science teachers would be without science classrooms. It may be possible to fit 7 and 8 at Broad Rock, but at that time, almost all of the elective classes would be sharing spaces. Art would likely be on a cart, music would likely be on a cart, etc. You would need a facilities audit to be able to say, A, can you do it? B, I think you could squish them in, to be honest, but do you want to do that? Is that reasonable educationally? And then the bigger problem becomes, then where do the 6th graders go? So there are really 2 options for where you'd put the 6th graders. One, you move the 6th grade to South Road and the preschool relocates to Peacedale. Or 2, South Road reopens as a K-6. The preschool still has to relocate to Peacedale. And then Matunic, Peacedale, Wakefield, and West Kingston change from a K-4 to a K-6. So I'm going to give you some big ideas about what this would look like, and then I'm going to go site by site. So by closing Curtis Corner and moving 7-8 to Broad Rock, you lose about $500,000 in housing aid. Curtis Corner fields are used by middle school sports programs. There are no official track or throwing fields at Broad Rock, so students would need to be bused to Curtis Corner fields if we still owned them at a cost to the district or a loss of that program. We will need to accommodate grade 6 somewhere, which would necessitate opening South Road in some capacity. The scenario would offer no operational costs, as we would be savings, as we would be closing one building to open another. The scenario would require full elementary K through 6 redistricting in every school. I would have to begin by laying off every Curtis Corner teacher, every Broad Rock teacher, half of the high school teachers and half of the elementary school teachers, because everybody's certification is not aligned to this program requirement. Some of our 6th grade teachers now have a high school certification with a middle school endorsement. Some of our Broad Rock teachers right now are more senior than our Curtis Corner teachers, so we couldn't just flop the Curtis Corner teachers over to Broad Rock. There's seniority questions, there's questions of certification and boundaries. The scenario would, I talked about that. If preschool moves to Peacedale, we have to change out all the toilets and hand washing to small hand washing facilities and toilets at Peacedale and flip-flop them with South Road. That will be an expense for renovations. There's also going to be a dramatic increase to playground. And I have pictures to show you. The Curtis Corner Gym is used every night by town groups, basketball, men's leagues, South Kingstown Youth Wrestling, etc. The high school gym is small, and so it would continue to be a need from our perspective, although we do recognize that the town athletic and recreation center may be able to take some of this traffic. South Road can't. So closing down Curtis Corner, I don't know if that was, I really don't know if that was in the plan for what the athletic center would accommodate, so I can't speak more to that. No loss of administrators, as I already explained to you. There's 2 at Curtis Corner now. Preschool coordinator would have to go with the preschoolers at Peacedale in sort of like a sub-program. And then we'd need an assistant principal at Peacedale and a principal at South Road. There would probably be a loss of custodial staff at Curtis Corner and perhaps a little bit of a need to add at Peacedale. There will be a loss of 2 clerks and an administrative secretary at Curtis Corner. So scenario 1, where the 6th graders would go, would be to reopen South Road and make it the grade 6 school. This scenario would offer virtually no operational costs because you're closing one to open another. Major renovations I already spoke about. I'm not sure if 6th grade students would fit here. The last time we had 6th graders in an elementary school was 15 years ago. They need a minimum of 14 full-size classrooms, plus health, art, band, music, orchestra, 2 computer labs, library, OT, PT, reading, resource, etc., and a gym. And both at South Road and Wakefield, we have a gym, a cafetorium. I think I got that right. I think Mr. Champion would be proud of me. And so it would be, in my opinion, as a former elementary principal, I don't know how I would schedule all of these kids for gym and eat, so they may have to eat in their classrooms. There are no science labs there. Right now, we receive funds from the Village Co-op as they lease space in our building, and that contributes to the South Road Fund. Right now, grade 6 students divide 35 full-size and 12 small spaces, and South Road has 18 large, 1 small conference room, and 3 small spaces. Health would be on a cart. We'd have a loss of fitness rooms. I talked about the playground. It's that 1 year, we go to a school for 1 year, and how do we identify with that school, which is a lot of what I heard when I first got here when Broad Rock had one. If teachers are not teaming, which I don't know how they could team because we don't have enough rooms, then RIDE would identify this 6th grade only school as an elementary school and would require all of the teachers to have certification. So you wouldn't have a specialized math teacher, you wouldn't have a specialized science teacher, you'd have 1 teacher who is what I was certified in as an elementary generalist. The other scenario is reopen South Road, make South Road and all 4 of our current elementary schools K-6. This scenario wouldn't offer operational cost savings as we'd be closing one to open another. We'd still need the major renovations to the bathroom. There still wouldn't be science labs. 6th grade would have to be self-contained with a generalist teacher. That means there'd be no teaming, and we'd have certification issues. Grade 6 hasn't been taught in this way in 15 years. It's not what's known to be national best instructional practice for 12-year-olds. All elementary schools in the district would need complete family and neighborhood redistricting. So if you now live in the Matunic community, you may be redistricted to go to South Road, because we now need people to go to South Road. Peacedale would need to accommodate maybe less kids, because half of their first floor would be preschoolers. This would provide also distributing 5th graders all in one school gives you an opportunity for economies of scale in terms of the grade 5 numbers. Now you would be doing, I think what Mr. Daly LaBelle alluded to, there would be a diseconomy of scale, because now what you're seeing is you're dividing those 5th grades over 5 sites, and so you wouldn't have that efficiency of class size. The good news for parents, it could be smaller class size, but it would be very expensive. What's different in the last 15 years since we've had grade 6 in an elementary model? All-day kindergarten, which doubled the space that we need for kindergartners in our town. Grade 6 teaming, specialized instruction from 1-person to 4-person teams. Special ed regulations have changed. ESL regulations have changed. We didn't have occupational therapy and physical therapy rooms when I was a teacher in the late 80s and early 90s. Grade 5 and 6 students right now have access to intramurals, clubs, late buses, lockers, fitness center. Those would not be available to them, which may not be a big deal, but it's still there. Contractually, class sizes have decreased since 15 years ago. So we could fit more children into these spaces because your contracts read that you allowed higher amounts of children in each class. And after the station fire tragedy, fire code regulations for the egress of small children has changed. So preschool, kindergarten, and first grade students cannot be sub-level. So at Peacedale, they wouldn't be allowed to have a classroom in the basement. The next slide shows housing aid lost by school. This was developed by Alan Lord in 2010, and I didn't ask Mrs. Sutherland to update it, but it certainly could be updated. At the time, if you closed Curtis Corner, you'd lose $583,000 over a number of years in housing aid to the town that would never be brought back. We lost the South Road aid. I've asked the Rhode Island Department of Education, based on the closure in 2005, if we can get that money back. I've written on 3 occasions, and we were denied. We're never getting that housing aid back. So if you close one of these buildings, that money is lost to the town. There are smaller figures for the other sites that were investigated at that time. I didn't put it in here in order to insinuate that they were being discussed, but that's the information we had in 2010. What would change? K-8 curriculum and instructional quality, preschool quality and singular site, elementary school maps and boundaries would change for the entire community. High school and PBGR preparation might be affected. The quality of science instruction without labs in 6 and 7 would be a factor. And our teachers, pre-K through 12, would need to be completely reorganized due to certification, preference, seniority, and need. What would be done with Curtis Corner building? Unfortunately, it would be a perfect site for a competing charter school who has a football team. It'd mean a loss of South Kingstown jobs and revenue to the town. I don't know where the middle school and high school teams would play in practice. Our housing aid would not be renewed. Our grade 6 teachers would lose curriculum coordinator positions, and that's compensation. Many things would need to be renegotiated in our teacher contract and perhaps our contract with ESP and Council 94, because you would be completely reorganizing the PK through 8 infrastructure from K through 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8 to PK to 6 and 7, 8. The last time we looked at this, in 2010, there were expenses in closing Curtis Corner, not savings. These would certainly need to be recalibrated to current, but they identified a staffing cost, an operational savings of $48,000, cost to upgrade South Road and Peacedale, the loss of housing aid, cost of unemployment, cost of renovation to the, that should say the playground, district-wide moving expenses, and cost of the playground renovations. I've listed each of the regulations that speak to this information, and then a look at the primary sites. So today, the preschool has 2 empty classrooms. South Road has 18 full-size classrooms, a cafeteria, a library, 3 small spaces, and a very small conference room. The Village Co-op rents 2 classrooms. We receive revenue through a lease for that. We have an OT-PT room in the library. It takes up the whole library. It took up the whole basement of Hazard, but we couldn't keep it at Hazard any longer because of the station fire tragedy egress. We have 17 we have an indoor gross motor room in the cafeteria that's grant funded. We have 17 full-size classrooms, 6 preschool, 2 speech language, 2 district storage, and we don't have district storage anywhere else. So if the district storage was taken over, we would need to purchase portable storage units. I had a busy Christmas vacation looking over this stuff. We have the Skip Cafe, where children who are in our all-day program receive lunch, and children who are in the morning program receive breakfast. We have 1 room that's used for child outreach that 15 years ago was housed at the Southern Rhode Island Collaborative that no longer exists. We have a teacher's room that's required by contract, and nurse's room, a room for language arts, math, and science, which is grant funded, and the teachers rotate their classes in. And then we have those 2 empty for growth of the program and storage. There's no other storage. So I put pictures in because Since we've moved to South Road, I don't know how many members of the community or parents that don't have students in the school know what we're using these rooms for. So the first is the CAFA gymatorium. And what they use this for, to me, it looks like Discovery Zone. So I think I've dated myself. I used to bring my children to a place with all of this type of equipment when they were young. And this is for indoor recess, for gross motor play. Parents who have younger children will come there and have parent groups, and their children can play. And it's really nice, especially last year when we had all that snow and the kids couldn't go outside. Our parents are very, very devoted to play and to have social experiences among kids. So that room is completely used in that regard. The next room is the occupational therapy PT room. Most of our preschool students, or some of our preschool students, have special needs, significant special needs, and they require this level of structure. They're very big pieces. They have and the occupational therapists and physical therapists work them through it. This is the former South Road Library. I don't know what big spaces I would use at Peacedale for these two structures. The third is our preschool playground. If you recall, our preschool coordinator wrote a grant through the Early Learning Challenge at the Rhode Island Department of Education. This is size suitable for a preschool special needs child. It's accessible, wheelchair accessible, and we also have in the back the former South Road playground. Either this program would have to be demolished or the playground would have to be moved to Peacedale. When we tried to move the Mattie Saravo playground from the high school, the folks who came out to analyze that said it would be destroyed in the move, so it wasn't worth it for it. It would be better to keep that lovely playground for the community of near the high school to be able to use and create another center at South Road. So Peacedale, if the preschool moved to Peacedale, Peacedale would lose recess yard space because the playgrounds would need to be separated by 2 or 3 different fencing units. The preschoolers can't cross programs. They need to be kept totally separate. At Peacedale, the preschool program would need to be housed where the kindergarten rooms are due to the 2006-2007 fire code egress regulations. The plumbing at Peacedale and South Road would need to be swapped. The playgrounds at both sites would need to be redesigned. Matunic today has 1 empty classroom, 1 recess room, and 1 Confucius Institute classroom grant funded by Hanban Institute in China. Matunic and West Kingston have 20 full-size classrooms, 5 small spaces, full-size music, art, 2 ALP, that's the district program, 2 grade 4, 3 grade 3, 1 special needs classroom, a computer lab, 2 kindergarten, etc. They have, that should say recess room, not recess roo. So they have the most space in the district. Peacedale has 3 empty classrooms, no recess rooms. They have a ground floor and they have a sub-level floor. They have many small spaces. We have 3 empty rooms, but we're likely going to need another grade 4 and another grade 1 room next year, so 2 of those empty spaces would be taken up. Wakefield today is full, no recess rooms, and West Kingston is full. Did I lose West Kingston? No, there we go. What would change for preschool and elementary students? The facilities study would need to decide if they could fit. Preschool program goes to Peacedale. Elementary buildings were very crowded, especially those small spaces before grade 5 moved to Broad Rock. That would go back in addition to grade 6. To add the preschool, 5 and 6 would potentially create small shared space, lack of privacy for special needs mental health programs, and could be itinerants on a cart, but I can't say that with certainty because I am not a facilities auditor. In conclusion, I bet you're glad that I'm concluding, but it's a lot of information. The community closed South Road in 2005. I wasn't here, but we still live with the emotional turmoil. It was significant. There were minimum savings in personnel. We continued to maintain the building. There was vandalism. Housing aid was lost forever. The community investigated a potential school closure in my second year in 2010, which identified an elementary school as the school to close, and the school committee and the town council stood with the community and didn't close that school. The emotional turmoil was very significant. If you are collectively interested in closing a school, I would suggest paying for a facilities study. An RFP can be prepared if it's the will of the governing bodies. Hopefully, what I've done today is to give you the big ideas that surround this decision for you. And that's kind of all I can say on the subject.
Thank you. That was very thorough. I think you might have a second career lined up as a facilities
No, thank you.
auditor. For what it's worth, about halfway through, I think it stopped making sense, obviously, to close any school to me. Does anybody have any questions regarding?
I just want to say thank you for putting that together. I think that's a very important piece for us to have and for the community. It's a question that does come up, and, you know, that's the kind of information we really need to get to the community. So I appreciate the work that went into it and the presentation.
Certainly.
Thank you.
I also want to add that this is absolutely commendable. You really did your homework. This is, like you said, an awful lot of information.
It was important. I could tell from that meeting that that you needed to have at least some idea of what this would look like
And
for
we
you.
didn't have all of this information, so this was a tremendous help. And I applaud you for your efforts and all of you collectively for doing your job and enlightening us. And I hope that there is a way, if we get questions as a council or you get questions as a school committee, some of these ideas can be disseminated in that the public really needs to know, because it's so easy for somebody to come up to a podium and say to us, you know, that the enrollment is declining, we have to close the school. We do hear that. We hear that an awful lot. But not necessarily is that always the case. So this was very enlightening, and so I'm hoping now that this is public record, it's out there, that there can be a way to facilitate questions to either the school committee at large or you as our superintendent, because you did a great job. Thank you.
We'll load all of these on our website, so you can simply direct them to the website, but I'd be happy to speak to anyone independently.
Thank you. You did a wonderful job.
I think from my perspective, the last piece that would sort of complete this, and you do not have to do this, is just a back-of-the-figure type of calculation. How far would enrollment have to decline when it actually would make sense to close?
Believe it or not, I tried to give that a go. It's the first step of where would the 6, 7, 8 cohort go. We just don't have another building big enough to accommodate them in a foreseeable period of time. And so if you can't, you know, if you were looking at building a new high school and using your schools differently, I would have more to go with. But our buildings are small and narrow and can't be built upon, and that makes it tricky to project out the when. Believe me, I tried.
Actually, along the line of the sort of mentioning, you know, if you were looking at different high school, you know, you mentioned that the high school was one of the schools that is a willed building. Right?
Yes.
And I'm assuming we know which family that is, that it's willed to.
Believe it. Yes. We came here 10 years ago, and I think Dale let us look at the documents, or told us that Matunic and the high school, if they were no longer used by us, would go back to the families.
And that might be something that I would encourage, that we could visit the families and address.
All right, Keith, you want to?
I looked at the deed for several of the schools, and Matunic specifically specified that as long as it's used for a school or recreation, it doesn't have to be returned. So if Matunic was no longer used as a school, if it was used as a recreational facility, we wouldn't have to give it back. And for whatever reason, that sticks in my mind. I remember that specifically. Some of the other schools, having looked at the deeds, didn't have those type of restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to state that, you know, we did have the conversation last winter that we would do a study for you. That was kind of an agreement that we had, and so I'm glad that we did take this step, because really as a school committee, we did make that commitment to do this, so I'm glad that we did follow through and get this put together.
So the next one's on class size, and this, just note that enrollment changes daily. The first page shows you each of the high school English classes, and this was given to me through the assistant principal, Kristen Klank, who's in charge of scheduling, and it's given at one moment in time. It does not reflect mental health staffing, library, nursing, et cetera, or approximately the 20 core classes that are co-taught at the high school by a regular education teacher and a special education teacher. So some of these are actually divided by 2. So at the high school English, class sizes range from an average class size in the lowest of 9.8 students to the highest of 21.7, with an average class size in English of 16.99, 12 full-time teachers, 1 ESL teacher that's not reflected herein, and please note that the contractual class size cap is 27. In portfolio, the average class size is 19.82. World language, the smallest smallest class is 7, and the largest is 26, and the average class size is 16.69. This is 7 full-time teachers. Overages is something we don't have contractually, but in an emergency situation, we can have an overage period. It's complicated, but that's what that means. I didn't want you to think we had some teachers that were teaching more than others. In math, we have class sizes in math as small as 3. We have 7, 9, and we have class sizes as high as 25 in math. The average class size for one of our teachers is 11, and for in the highest, average class size is 21, but the 11 full-time teachers and 1 part-time teacher with a class size cap of 27, the average is 16.3. Social studies historically has been our largest class sizes. I used to kid with the department chair that I don't know that either the kids love you or Mr. McCarthy is not too fond, because they were packed for the last several years. So they have a little breathing room this year. We have the smallest class sizes in 17 and highest average class size 22, with an average of in the department of 18.75. Oh, I was doing science. Social studies is 1866. Applied arts, this is, class size is 27, but there's a statement in our contract that allows for smaller class size due to workstations needs. So for example, the CAD, the architectural drafting, if we don't have 27 terminals, then we wouldn't be able to fit 27 students. So the average class size here is smaller, and we have some classes that are running with 4. We have some classes that are running with as many as 19 and 22, and our average class size is 15, 22. In phys ed and health, they can be larger than 27 because you can have several classes in the gym with several gym teachers, and the average class size is 21. Art, average class size is 19. Again, they have lower restrictions due to some of the stations, particularly in photography. Music, average class size is 15. So the average class sizes at the high school, I have a slide that shows by department, and is 17.74. At Curtis Corner Middle School, we have 3 7th grade teams and 3 8th grade teams. The class size contract is actually a team size of 104, which generates to a class size of 26, and the average class size at Curtis Corner is 21.16. Broad Rock, 3 6th grade teams and 10 5th grade teachers. Average class size at 5th grade is high. It's the year, usually I go between 10 to 12 sections of 5th grade. In the middle of the summer, we were looking like 10 would be just right, and as August approached, we started getting pretty full. In retrospect, by mid-September, I had wished I put another 5th grade in, but we just had an influx in those last weeks in August and first weeks in September. 6th grade teams are average between 22 and 23, with an overall at Broad Rock at 23.4. Matunic, I have 2 sections of kindergarten, 2 sections of 1st and 2nd and 4th grade, and 3 sections of 3rd grade, with an average class size at Matunic of 18.3. Peacedale, I have 5 sections of kindergarten, 3 sections of first and second, 4 sections of third, and 3 sections of fourth that are very tight. Our average class size in that building is 16.38. At Wakefield, we have 2 sections of kindergarten, 3 sections of everything else. Clearly, it's because some of the kindergartners are at Peacedale. And the average class size is 18.14. At West Kingston, 3 sections of everything but except for second grade, where I have 2 sections, and the average class size is 19.14. So the last slide shows the district as a whole. Our lowest class size in the district is where it should be, kindergarten, 16.58. Our second lowest is at the high school at 17.72. That's where we did a preliminary budget show to the school committee last night, and the 2 teacher positions that we're recommending for reduction are at the high school. The next one is transportation analysis.
Excuse me, can I, when I'm looking at Peacedale, is the 4th grade, are you saying there's?
3 of them.
3 4th grade classrooms, 24, 24, and 25? Do
Yes.
those classrooms get teacher aides at all?
Every classroom has the ability of having a teacher assistant. I can't say specifically how much time is allocated to each. That's a principal and building-based decision. But they don't have full-time teacher assistants, I'm sure of that. There is a special educator that's classroom is situated actually right between 2 of the 4th grade classrooms. She spends quite a bit of time in there.
So you've got the 4 3rd grades and then only 3 4th grades?
Right, so next year I'll need fourth grades. So for transportation, this was the least fun. My husband works in the petroleum products industry and was marginally helpful. So first, I'll show you in-district transportation costs. They vary by year, and it's just very unusual to see the red indicates a reduction from one year to the next. The black indicates an increase from one year to a next. And so I dive into, well, what goes into in-district transportation? Gas prices certainly affect the bid, the number of buses, standard and minibuses. Minibuses are needed to transport students with special needs or students who require a wheelchair or in small or no turnaround areas. Demographics of pickup and drop-off, where families are situated, where neighborhoods are situated, and any school boundary changes certainly affects it. Enrollment, the number of tiers, and the transportation contract parameters. It's interesting for people to hear that what's covered in the in-district costs is not just public school students. So we transport our public school students to and from home and school. We also transported, as of September, for at least 6 years of this look, and it shows on the chart, in-district charter school student transportation, which we were transporting from the homes to Compass Hill School and back, and from students' homes to Kingston Hill Academy and back, up until September of 2014, and now we no longer transport charter school students. Included in district costs is the in-district private school student transportation to all that are in South Kingstown, so Prout, Monsignor, Clark, Bradley, etc. Late buses are in this cost, and bus monitors, and for reference, in the 2014-15 school year, the cost of bus monitors was $470,269. We are billed at $24 an hour, although I doubt that that is what they receive. The next one that's provided per Mr. Stringfellow, because he showed me the site that you can go on over a 10-year period that will show you a 10-year trend in gasoline prices in the Providence area. So as you can see, it was just so erratic over this 10-year time period, from $1.65 a gallon to $4.11. The next slide, I tried to make sense of this to see if there was any correlation between gas prices are high, we spent more money, gas prices are low, we saved more money. And that was tricky because in sometimes when, like in 07, 08, when gas prices were at its highest, we saved $37,000 in district that year. And when it was one of the lowest in 14, 15, our transportation in district went up $480,000. So although it's a variable, I don't know if it's, I can't say that it correlates or it's causal. The next slide is the number of buses. So in 05, 06, during the DATCO contract, we had 33 standard buses and 11 minibuses. And then from 2008 till now, we've had 30 standard buses and 9 minibuses. We have 9 minibuses, 4 are 15 passenger with 2 wheelchair lifts, 5 are 29 passenger, 79 students ride minibuses. We're very spread out demographically, not quite as big as I thought before the manager explained to me, but each of our large buses can hold 77 students, 3 to a seat, which was not the most comfortable ride, but that is the capacity. The eligible number of public school students riding is 3,112, and the eligible number of private school students riding is 163. Our buses are not filled to capacity. The next slide shows school boundary changes. So 05, 06 is when South Road closed for savings. 07, 08 is when all-day K was added for educational purposes. That really, if there was a correlation between that move and an effect on transportation, I would have thought it would have costed more because we doubled our kindergarten teachers and TAs. We eliminated the midday bus run, but we added many more stops and students in the morning and afternoon, which would have made for a less efficient ride likely. So that thwarted my theory. 08, 09, we had a really big year and nothing happened. So it was a large cost year and no restructuring happened. 09, 10 was my first year, but the school committee and then Superintendent Hicks the year previous to my coming reconfigured Broad Rock and Curtis Corner for savings. The savings that were, I reviewed the school committee minutes of March 10th, 2009, and this $500,000 came all out of positions in reconfiguring. There were no anticipated transportation savings. So I have no evidence that this loss of 586 is, correlational or causal to that. 2010-11, the grade 5 moved to Broad Rock for educational reasons. School committee minutes of February 9th, 2010 reflect that. That happened to be a year also that we were mandatory statewide transportation for special education students out of district, and we have a jump of $696,000. Nothing happened the next year, and we saved $372. Skip moved to South Road, which shouldn't have impacted, and we increased $438. So I don't know that any one of these were predictors. They're certainly variables, but there are a lot of variables. The next slide shows other changes. We had a bus contract with DATCO from 05 to 08, and then First Student from 08 to 11, and then Ocean State from 11 to 15. For the entire 10-year period of time, and this is an area of large confusion, I think, there were 2 tiers. Tier 1 always was middle school and high school. So all students who then inhabited the high school, Curtis Corner, and Broad Rock were on Tier 1. Tier 2 is and always was elementary and preschool. So Matunic, Peacedale, Wakefield, West Kingston, and Skip, and South Road at one time. We transported charters starting in 05, 06, and we did so for 9 of the 10 years showing. Statewide transportation is completely out of our control. Students that are in out-of-district placements, we contact them, we tell them where they live, we pay the fee that they charge. We had a pilot program in 09, 010, which we believe contributed to some savings. We were offered an incentive if we were like the first ones on, knowing it was going to be mandatory the next year. And then the next year, there were a lot of bugs in that 2010-11 year, and now it's been mandatory to present. The next slide is our out-of-district busing costs. So this is what I was just speaking of, what we pay to ride. Statewide transportation, special ed out-of-district placements, out-of-district charter, and technical school. We also share the cost of homeless student transportation when a student moves to a different district. And so, again, I can't really provide that this one variable had an impact, but together they certainly all do. Participation in statewide transportation is mandatory. The other information on that slide is repetitive. We have extracurricular busing. This is for our athletic events, music events, and high school clubs. They're sort of insignificant in the large scheme of things, but I thought I should show them to you. We have field trip busing costs. Minibuses and buses are reimbursed from the principal's P account or building funds, but they are carried herein, also not that significant. And then the total page, what I'm sure will be confusing, pretty much puts it all together and tries to lay out in sort of a map form exactly what was happening in any given year. We have something that we're investigating called non-riders. So transportation is a mandatory requirement for all students, public and private, who live X number of miles away or close to the school. We have a significant amount of non-riders who are eligible for transportation, who are holding spots on buses, public and private, and that is never used. So we are exploring this year an option with the Rhode Island Department of Ed to ask parents who are never planning to use transportation to declare themselves walker only. The caveat is they have to do that for morning and afternoon, because if we put them on one tier, one bus run in the morning, then they're on the bus run in the afternoon. Right now, many of our buses are running half full, and that's because my daughter teaches in Pawtucket. She has one bus will do like an entire neighborhood and then pop right to the school, maybe 1 or 2 bus stops. We only have one scenario like that. Right across the street from Curtis Corner, a bus fills up and goes to West Kingston, but largely the stops are frequent and the homes are far apart. I explained that I was on Saugatucket, followed a bus, it stopped every single house. I run the school system. I know what all the parameters are, but if I'm a member of the community, I might be looking at it saying, oh my goodness, do we have to stop at every single home? And then I thought about, well, there's no sidewalks, and there's not snow on the road today, and how would that middle school child get to this next door neighbor's bus stop? So that's what happens. The next slide shows, for right now, children who have never once used transportation this year, but we've required to keep the spot and the route. At Monsignor Clark, which is a part of the in-district transportation, 52 students. Prout, 61, and then you can read the rest for yourselves. Private, 113 students. Public, 238. So what we'd like to do is continue to investigate that. We wouldn't make it mandatory, of course. People are entitled to this by law. But I mean, I can say for my senior child who drives, if the car broke down tomorrow, he's still not taking the bus. He would require his grandmother likely to drive him. So I would feel comfortable trying to save the community a little money in exploring this. And this is something we hope to offer. My conclusion on the transportation analysis is that there are a variety of variables that contribute to transportation costs on an annual basis. Gas prices, enrollment, transportation boundaries are all factors. I have no indication that there's a correlational or causal relationship between any one or 2 factors. There's no evidence that a transportation increase or decrease in any given year is due to a single factor. If it was, we'd try to address that.
So my only question about this presentation is, do the private schools pay?
No. That's a Rhode Island law. We pay for their transportation and their books.
We pay for their books as well?
Yes, we do.
I think it's great and important to know who's not riding the bus, because I do believe those kids that aren't choosing to ride the bus, those families would be happy to sign off saying they won't.
I agree.
So that could be a good savings.
We hope it is.
I had just 2 quick questions. One, I remember seeing in social media, like in the last year or so, a survey sent out by the schools asking about start times, and I was wondering if that was prompted by considering transportation costs and a better way to start earlier or later if there was a cost savings there.
It was actually prompted by the American Pediatrics Association publishing information last summer, I believe in August, speaking to the fact that adolescents require an inordinate amount of sleep, and if you have an adolescent, you can attest to it. And so what can we do as an educational provider to start the high school and middle school times later? In East Greenwich has done that. They have a different type of transportation system, a much smaller community, and they started a bit later. Barrington just voted on it for next year, and I read this morning that there is a significant petition by students and teachers that this is going to drastically change their lives. We had our high school students in particular really were not in favor of this type of a flip, because for us it would have to be a flip of the 2 tiers. If we changed everybody and said, okay, everybody go an hour later, then our youngest riders who are now going home in the dark in the snow would go home in the dark in the snow an hour later. And the parents were very concerned that, who would provide the child care in the early morning hours. Our daycare facilities in town have not been given the opportunity to see if that's possible. So we were not able to accommodate it because we would have to put on a 3rd tier or maybe go all on 1 tier, all schools starting at, let's say, 9 o'clock, which would increase your transportation costs by double. That was not something I could offer to the community, and therefore we're hoping that, as other districts start to explore this, if they can give us, more helpful tips, we're happy to explore it in the future, but it wasn't the will of the community at this time.
Okay, great, thank you.
DLI? Okay, so I'm not going to read this, but I'm going to tell you that our program is thriving and growing in leaps and bounds. Students in DLI are reading right now in Spanish at levels A through E, which D is the end-of-year benchmark in an English reading program. The structure of the morning routine in Spanish is that each day students participate in morning meetings. They greet each other in Spanish. They respond to teacher questions in complete sentences. They count the number and days they've been in school, which at present for this report was 78 days. All students are taught reading and phonics every day in Spanish and English. And math and writing units of study are taught alternatively. So math unit 1 could be in my classroom, the English only classroom, and then students learn math, English, unit 2 in Reis's classroom entirely in Spanish. Yesterday at the DLI informational meeting, we had a mom who is a 9th grade and 10th grade high school Spanish teacher, and when she's watching the videos of the children in the math lesson and they're counting, adding, subtracting in November in Spanish, we had parents saying, this isn't 1st grade? No, it's kindergarten. And when the children were reading at a level C in Spanish, the 9th grade teacher said, I want you to know that my 9th grade students right now are reading this same book. Me Gusta is the name of the book. And I don't know Spanish. It probably is. So I apologize if I pronounced that wrong. And she said, and they struggle with it. And these kindergartners are reading it fluently. She also spoke of the fact that that she could tell that the teachers were native Spanish speakers because of the way they roll their R's. And if you haven't learned the concept to roll your R's by the time you're 3, you'll never be able to, because it's something that's developmental in terms of your speech pattern. That was a new one for me. So the professional development has been a big part of our learning experience with dual language. We have funding supported by the Rhode Island Foundation in partnership with the International Charter School. During that time, we learned the value of morning meetings, how to set up and teach for biliteracy, how to work in a co-teaching model. We also have had an opportunity for teachers from Pawtucket and the ICS to visit and observe in South Kingstown, and now South Kingstown teachers will go to the ICS to observe that practice. They are working on a book study of professional learning community. There's been intense parent support. Our coordinator hosts a monthly DLI parent coffee conversation. During the sessions, parents talk about homework. They seek out resources. If you haven't checked out the DLI webpage, it's full of all sorts of information. The parents have requested to build a district Facebook page. They watch videos of their children speaking and reading and writing in Spanish. They discuss opportunities for their children to speak Spanish outside of the classroom. We also, parents have organized field trips and cultural events and community events. In here, we have some parent testimony. A parent of a West Kingston student has said, through this DLI program, it's one of the most wonderful things I've ever witnessed in public education. Another parent spoke about any worries that she had, that this would be stressful or too much is non-existent. The structure is amazing, thanks to the teachers. In only 2 months, my child can read in Spanish. Another parent shared with me that the progress in acquiring both languages is simply amazing. The program is everything we promised, which that's good. that was pretty comforting to hear. And at a recent school committee meeting, a West Kingston parent shared a letter from another parent who couldn't attend saying that her son struggles with learning in many areas, but not in Spanish. Spanish is an area he's excited about and engaged in. We also, we have a ton of video clips, so I have included a PowerPoint that is the PowerPoint we're showing parents at the informationals. If you click on the PowerPoint, it should be enabled tomorrow. We moved to Google, so we had to publicly open it. They're in the process of doing that. You'll see children who have written a 3-page book entirely in Spanish, reading it back to you in Spanish. You'll see children who are reading at the higher level than expected in English in Spanish, and you'll see an entire math lesson, and I think some parent testimonials. The one-to-one device brief, written by Principal Mezzan.
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
I just had a quick question about that. So as teachers retire, you're looking to hire Spanish-speaking dual language immersion teachers. I'm curious if they are stepping forward, they're certified. I'm just a little bit concerned that we're not going to have the teaching staff to do this, or we'll have to be really getting a lot of people from out of town to come in for it.
So we have no Spanish-speaking native teachers to do the Spanish side. Right. Those are the teachers that when we, if a 4th grade teacher were to retire, then we would move, or likely through the internal interviews, someone would move into that 4th grade position, and then the 1st grade job that would now become open would be filled by that Spanish-speaking new person that you speak of. Right. The English side person, we have a cohort of, I believe, 20 of our current teachers who we're cost sharing the ability for them to get certified in ESL, because that's running tandem to this. Even if DLI never existed, ESL used to be a pull-out program and is now becoming a, if you're the 2nd grade teacher and you have a ESL student in your classroom, you need to be ESL certified in an attempt to make certain our teachers remain our teachers, and we don't have to, because we only have about 2 teachers in the district now who are ESL certified, and neither one of them are teaching ESL. So that's a cohort that's going forward that can receive the ESL students if that's the job they choose, or can be the English side teacher. So that group I'm not worried about. In our plan to have 2 schools online, that was the attrition rate that we mapped out for you all. It becomes much more complicated, and we'll speak to what you fear and what I fear if we are opening it up in all schools all at the same time. So that meeting of the parent demand and balancing that with the needs of our staff would become trickier the more sites that are opened.
I see that you have grant funding from the Rhode Island Foundation. Does that renew every year, or how long is that anticipated to last for?
So the grant funding from Rhode Island Foundation, we have 2 or 3 buckets of grant money from them. One was for the initial start-up costs for some, Spanish books and some professional development that only we were doing but not sharing with ICS in Pawtucket. So Lindy, who is our coordinator, will renew that grant for 1st grade, and hopefully that will be approved by the Rhode Island Foundation. The other grant that we have with them is a consortium. So that's really strong because the International Charter School, the Pawtucket School Department, the Rhode Island Department of Ed, URI, Rhode Island College, and us are all in it together. So I expect that will be a yearly endeavor.
Okay.
What the Rhode Island Foundation would like to do is use us as the lab site classroom for the state for suburban areas. So they have an interest in making sure that we're a very strong program. Rhode Island Department of Ed and the colleges do. And that's why Rhode Island College is partnering with us to help get our teachers certified.
Okay, so
In
there's lots
addition, we have teachers that have written grants on their own through SCEF to get more Spanish books in the libraries. And a parent yesterday said that I should say out loud that perhaps the public school libraries could start buying some Spanish books.
Okay.
So there I did.
Great.
Public libraries. Public libraries, not public school libraries. Public.
Thank you.
Sure. So the one-to-one device program, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you're seeing, it was in grade 9 and 10 this year, you're seeing the principal's goals that he reviewed with his teachers on the first day of school and over the summer. Google Classroom set up as the learning management system for all teachers at the high school. Google Drive used as the primary tool for students to submit work and receive feedback from teachers. Those have both been realized. Teachers will begin implementing instructional strategies that implement the 4 C's of communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity in a blended learning environment. And we're initiating that using technology platforms like BlendSpace and infographics like WebQuest. And goals moving forward is to make certain that we at the high school have a shared understanding of how technology can be used to promote and increase student engagement, personalization, and achievement. Then one of the measurements that we're using is a software program called Bright Bites. This was administered to all students in grades 9 and 10 in the beginning of October to the middle of October, so roughly 4 to 6 weeks into school. According to Bright Bites, and they'll resurvey again in May and then use that as the benchmark for the next school year, 70% of South Kingstown High School teachers surveyed expressed that they either strongly agree or agree with the statement technology use in class can enhance student learning. And keep in mind that 70% of our teachers are not in the one-to-one program. It's just for 9th and 10th grade students right now. Similarly, 68% of students either strongly agree or agree with that same statement. And then these are some of the other pieces of feedback only 6 weeks into the school year. So 88% of students report that almost daily there is computer use in each classroom. 25% say at least weekly, 37 monthly. Students are asked to receive feedback from others in the classroom via technology. And it also references what pedagogical educational standard that aligns with. Students are asked to chat or do a video chat application, 6% at least weekly, 10% monthly, and that's just 6 weeks into school. So that to me, although small, is very different than what we were seeing last year or the year before. So students and teachers are really engaging. Students are asked to use web tools to receive information online, 22% say weekly. Asked to write online after 6 weeks of school, 19% say at least weekly. They're doing e-portfolios, 27% say at least weekly. Collaborating online with classmates, 45% at least weekly. That's huge and very, very different than what how we were working before. Students are asked to collaborate online with teachers, 27%. Collaborate online with students at other schools, 13%. Asked to use an online space for documents, 89%, to collect and analyze data, 29%, conduct experiments, 27%, research online, 66%, identify and solve authentic problems, 29%. Then I gave you a smattering of some of the professional development. We do a job satisfaction survey to all employees in South Kingstown, and the #1 vote getter was Give Me Technology PD. We have had a wonderful, wonderful session on September 22nd where teachers and administrators and some of our FUSE fellows, which is another grant we got involved in, provided the professional development, and teachers got to choose what they needed. I attended, I picked things I needed different than what Pauline needed, and I gave you the brochure, and it was one of the best professional development sessions I've ever attended, and the feedback from our colleagues was amazing. Just looking to see if I hit it all. I'm done. Ta-da!
Thank you.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Any items? ask council members for.
I just had one comment. This was obviously very thorough, and I really appreciate all this information. The only one tiny thing that I would have preferred is maybe to get this a couple days in advance, so that I could have maybe saved you a little time and been able to target what questions I had. But this was great, and I'm glad that I have all this info now, and I look forward to going over it. I'm sure I'll have more questions. I'll send it along.
And also, I mean, we do have other meetings, and so feel free to ask them at the other meetings, and we'll be able to get additional information to you. Literally, when I say to you, this was like weekends, all Christmas vacation, you gave me like 2 weeks. So I would have gotten it to you earlier if it was available to you earlier, but we wanted to make certain that it was correct information. It was voluminous, but.
And I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Sure.
Comment. I appreciate that you addressed all of our questions, all of our concerns. To Liz's point, if you got it to us earlier, you wouldn't have had to read it to us.
You know what the problem is, though, sometimes with that I found, is that when I email them to you and the public hasn't heard it, then there will be people that will come to the microphone at either our meetings or your meetings that didn't get the information, similar to what Mrs. Clow had spoken
Right.
of, that sometimes then you can point to a particular meeting, although, you know, public speaking is not
No.
my favorite thing to do.
No, I understand. And I appreciate that, but you probably have presented a lot of this at your meetings. So the public, I think, has had an opportunity for a lot of it. But thankfully, thank you. I mean that respectfully.
I appreciate it.
Right, what, if I, are we gonna talk about at the school committee table? We haven't really, the information, the one-to-one device, I don't need to get into detail with my questions right now if I know that we're gonna be bringing that, if we're gonna be discussing that at our table in the next few meetings. Or,
I don't know I don't know if you're addressing me, but I don't know what the
I'm-
agenda items are for the future.
all right, well, I'm
So,
just wondering if there's an
this can-
expectation that we'll get, more detailed questions about the one-to-one.
I wasn't planning on bringing anything forward beyond the significant report that's in your hands now, but if asked, certainly I comply with the will of the school committee.
All right, well, I would appreciate that. I think that there is some more detail, and so I guess I'll just put that on the public record right now. And then I think just maybe for next year, I think the capital improvement, we always kind of go beyond that because there are a lot of questions, and I think the dialogue between the boards is very valuable, and I totally appreciate in South Kingstown how often we get together and do talk. But I wonder if, like, this is really pretty deep, and I don't think community members had any idea we'd be talking about all of this. So there was just kind of a lot of information. I know the meeting's online, but once it starts to become historical. So I'm not crazy with how this was handled necessarily, but just looking forward, if we can kind of look at this January meeting as being a more, kind of a second, more general budget meeting, as well as the CIP, just so the community is more fully aware of what we're going to be talking about. Just a thought,
Sure. I think, it'll be another year before we get to this situation again, and we can see how we can get people prepared for it. Any other comments from people up this side of the room?
I agree that it would have been nice to have this a few days before so we could formulate questions or whatever, but I certainly appreciate the presentation, and I think it's great to have you present it publicly because I do think people will watch this. I think there's a lot of people that watch these meetings and are highly interested, and I believe the explanations publicly are needed, and I appreciate you giving that presentation to us and doing the work you did.
I also look at it and have to say thank you. It was very intense, it was very long, but in saying that, my mind was going with, there were so many questions that were asked of you by the council that this was your opportunity to answer those questions and present them professionally and courteously as a response to the questions that we had actually asked you. So, sure, could we have gotten them earlier? Absolutely. But this was our opportunity to speak about all of those because we were the ones that brought them to you from the get-go. So I thank you. I thank you for the thorough work, and I applaud you for having all of you, your input in 2 weeks because there was a lot that was asked of you, and we do appreciate everything you do. Certainly we do.
Great. And with that, I'll open it up for comments from the public, if there are any. Could you please just come up to the podium, state your name for the record.
Kevin Jackson, 24 Wingate Road. As I came here tonight, I looked around the room and I realized that I actually have been coming to these budget meetings for over 10 years and realized all of a sudden that with Maureen and Scott not here, I think I've done this longer than anybody here except Mr. Alfred, which really scared me. I call this the fire hose meeting, and we have a town council. And I think in the past, to your point about the community, we've had a lot of members who've served for long times. And now we have 4 new members in the last couple of years, and this truly is the fire hose meeting. And I remember when I first got on the school committee in 2006, first started attending meetings around 2001. The first 2 years I was like, oh my God. And it just takes time. So it's just a stacked process here. You're going to have more questions, but it's just going to take time. The other thing I want to talk about was the enrollment in Curtis Corner. You know, I've known the Curtis Corner stuff for years. I'm very active in the community, and the number one question I get is, you know, why aren't they going to close Curtis Corner? When they're going to close Curtis Corner, when are you going to do it? And I always say, it's $568,000 a year. It's never going to happen. Where's the high school football team going to play? And most of the community members kind of look at it like, yeah, he's just saying that. So you do have to have this type of thing. But the downside is, honestly, maybe a business executive like me or some of you, to sit through that is tough. I mean, there's a lot of information there if it's not a day-to-day stuff. So it's really our jobs as the people who come to these meetings in the town council and the school committee to work together. And I think we have to really start looking at what the future is going to be. And again, having sat at that table for all those years and having to make tough decisions on short time is not the right idea. The $500,000, I was there that night. That was awful. The full history on that is literally the state called us up 2 weeks earlier and said, we're cutting $500K, find it. We had already passed the budget. So what I would like to see is a longer-term approach when it comes to the schools. And it's got to be 3 to 5 years. You know, to me, a long-term vision is actually closing the high school, and obviously you'd have to work something out with the person there, but that was built in 1950. And taking the money from that, using the high school, this happened in Warwick 35 years ago. They took a junior high school and made it apartments. Very popular to this day. If you go down West Shore Road, that facility is still there. If you look on the right, that was a junior high school. It's one of the most popular condos in Warwick. I think we could do a similar thing here, raise a lot of money, take that money, and then make Broad Rock the high school. You'd have to put investment in there, but not as much because it's a newer school, and all the schools and make it revenue neutral. The only way to do something that drastic is a 3 to 5 year plan. If every 2 years we sit and say, well, why don't we close this school? Why don't we do transportation? It's never going to happen. So I think that's the next step we have to do. The good news is the bubble class, the class that generated the South Road school closure, it's correct. My son was in first grade. He graduates this year. So that bubble class is out. So they were the last of that bubble. I think this is the new norm. I think this is about what we're going to see. So a long-term 3 to 5 year plan is what we need. Not every 2 years, let's redo this. The stuff you saw today, we did the RAC committee in 2010. I mean, it's literally the 4th time I've seen it, honestly. Thank you.
Hi, Kenny Burke. I've appeared before the council and the capital budget meetings a few times. I'm with the Healthy Places by Design Bike and Walk Committee, so I just wanted to make a connection between our presentations to the town council capital budget and some of the work that the school committee, the school department is doing in terms of quick math, about 350 students that are walking, choosing to walk to school, or maybe they don't have any other options. We've advocated for a piece of equipment through the Public Services Department, about $30,000 for heavy snow events to keep what the town staff call the loop open, mostly in the concentrated, heavily traveled areas in downtown. But we're asking also consideration of the school routes. The intention is simply just to make pedestrian corridors safe for kids to get to school, as well as in downtown to keep the central business district thriving. So I just want to make that connection that we've been advocating on the school, the town capital budget side, and for this presentation tonight, I just wanted to make sure that I did pay attention to most of your presentation, but I did catch that little tidbit in the transportation component, and I was happy to see that you're actively pursuing those numbers. There may actually be cost savings pretty deep in making sure that kids are able to walk to school year-round if they choose to. So, thank you.
Any other people rushing to the podium? Any final comments?
I just, some of the, just to be clear, a lot of those numbers, those kids aren't actually walking. Their parents are driving them, though, correct? I can't imagine.
To be honest, I don't know. I just know they've never shown up on a bus. So what I
Right.
didn't show you are people who take the bus once or twice or 3 or 4 times. These are children who have not ever set foot on the bus this year. But in seeing the parking lots, they're pretty
Right.
full
I mean,
of
I
parent
certainly
drivers.
know a bunch of people that do drive their kids to school, and they would never be walkers. They just, parents are choosing to provide transportation to their kids. So I don't think they can all be classified as walkers, though.
I would agree.
They can be classified for money savings, but they're really not going to walk them.
I think, the thing that jumped out at me from all the presentations tonight was that gap number again, which is really just sort of heartbreaking in a lot of ways. So I'm looking forward to hearing the findings of the task force. Hopefully there's something we can do about that. But other than that, I thank you for your time and the presentations tonight, all the work you've done. I know it goes beyond really the scope of how much oversight we are supposed to have of the schools. So I appreciate that you make that available for us to review. It's about 9:15 here, and I think we're ready to adjourn. So, thank you.